Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number... Wait, what number is it? 27 of the Town Hall meeting. I'm going to be joined by some fine gentlemen yet again. We're going to do it without graphics because I changed computer recently and I hadn't... Like, I tried to boot my computer today, like, long story. Like, I was missing a cable. I was like, okay, this is too difficult. So, yeah, no specific graphics, but everybody's going to introduce themselves and we'll have shout-outs at the end. So don't worry, you'll learn about everybody's social media and all that. I'll give a quick intro of everybody and then you guys can add to that if you want. What is that noise?
No, sorry, it's the train.
Okay.
Can't really fix this much.
Okay.
I try.
Maybe push to talk. Might be a good idea.
Yeah, I can't do this yet.
Okay, so in the top left we got the almighty Carson. Intro yourself, Carson. You know what?
I'll intro myself. I could do it. My name is Carson. I am a caster sometimes, and I'm a coach sometimes, and I'm a really bad player. But I have played the maps. I know the maps. I know the creeps. I know what items they drop. I know what I'm talking about. I promise. I swear. I swear. My name's Carson. Hello. Thank you for having me.
And then we got the legend himself, the elusive guy that I've been trying to interview for a while. What's up, Remo?
Yo, guys, I'm the Remo. I'm the Demo. Glad to be here. Todd and I were talking about this town hall for a while now because we feel maps need to get changed. It's way overdue. And I think I have a decent idea of, what's good about maps, what could be better about maps. And I'm looking forward to getting into it.
And then we got Tenchi. I believe you're the map maker for Autumn Leaves, right?
Yeah, that's right, man. I also am admin in the RBTV community. Probably many knows. It's one of the biggest German communities, Warcraft communities. And yeah, I also help making maps and give my feedback whenever I can.
And we got Maffe from Germany, who you're a return guest on the tunnel, right?
Yes, I've been here once before when you also talked about maps. So yeah, I'm also a map maker, player, not very talented. And I'm a melee map reviewer at a Hive workshop where you can find a lot of melee maps. And yeah, that's about it.
What's your best work? Is there any of your maps currently in the map pool?
Not in the 1v1 map pool. There's the map Northern Fellwood in the 4v4 map pool. And the map Brightwater Oasis, which is played on Battle.net ladder, but nobody really plays there anymore.
Okay. Yeah. All right, let's get started. Remo, like this town hall was your idea, so I'll take your instructions. Like, what do you want me to open up first?
Yeah, to give a light overview for all of our viewers, we're gonna be going through the map pool, of course. This town hall is dedicated entirely to maps, to the current pool, and what could be added to the new pool. So the big questions are, which maps are good and which are bad of our current tournament map pool? Less so about ladder. This is a little bit more focused on tournament pool. And which new ones could be added to the tournament map pool, but also to ladder. War 3 champions and Hive Workshop are working closely together. I'm sure they're watching this as well. So this will be part of the discussion also. And then we're going to ask some questions here towards the players and the personalities in the Discord about map making in general, like philosophical questions, I guess, if you will. Are we supposed to try to focus on fixing old maps? Like, recently Twisted Meadows has been improved a little bit. We've seen other improvements like that before. Or should we try to focus more on introducing and creating new maps? And also what actually is responsible for a good map design. What makes for a good map design? But we're gonna start it off pretty predictable. So I think we're gonna go with we're gonna go a little bit in between old maps and new maps. So let's start with the old ones that we all know, right? So let's go with Amazonia. I think we're gonna go alphabetically here, and we can open up Amazonia, and it's a map we're all very familiar with. One of the smaller maps in the pool, and I think we can go around in a circle and talk about the map. What's the pros? What's the cons? And how does it belong in the map pool nowadays?
Who wants to start? Carson.
Yeah, I'll start. Cool. Amazonia. I'm not actually sure how old these maps are because I'm kind of a new school player. Maybe I'll leave that up to you guys how newly introduced they are. I know Echo Isles is probably the oldest map in the pool, maybe TM, but AZ, I think a relatively new map compared to the very, very old maps in the pool. Fun fact, I think it has the most creep to tome ratio of any map in the pool. That's
And
something
nobody
Hitman
picks them
said
up.
the other day. Nobody picks them up, and Twitch chat always tells them to, and they never do. It's a weird map because there's only one gold mine, and the expansion has like lots of gold, and it has lots of creeps on it, but it's a very small rush distance. And, you know, if you were to compare this to the other map, which is just one natural expansion for both players, I would say this is better of the two, comparing it to Echo Isles, of course. But still, there may be a small bias in the community about maps with only one natural expansion. So I kind of like it personally. I enjoy playing it, but as a spectator, I think there's two sides to it. If you enjoy it as a player, if you enjoy it as a spectator. As a player, I enjoy it. As a spectator, not so much. I think it can get kind of stale, similar to Echo Isles, but you know, maybe not the first to remove in the map pool, I would say.
Okay, Remo, go ahead.
All right, so Amazonia, very clearly one of the two small maps we have in the tournament pool. This one and Echo Isles. It is, as Carson already mentioned, quite different from Echo Isles, and I also like the point that he brought out about player enjoyment versus observer enjoyment. I think I'm kind of in a similar boat. I feel like AZ makes for some fairly interesting early game creep routes and interaction, unlike Echo Isles, especially when you fight for the kobolds and you fight for the trappers or the trolls, and you do the lightning shield creep and so on. So there's a lot of intricate stuff you can do, but it feels like it plays the same every time. Human fast expands every time. Orc versus human looks the same here. It seems like every single game here is the same. And that is even with there being a renegade wizard and with there being a lightning shield. We still pretty much have the same hero combos. Every blue moon, you're going to see a shadow hunter first here, but it's very rare. It's just simply very small. It's very predictable what's going to happen. You should know if I hit my level 2 timings like this, if I stay on his ass and make sure he doesn't hit level 3 too quickly, it's very, very predictable. The camps are oftentimes very large in size, like the red camp, like the merc camp. You cannot take for a very long time, especially if the opponent is close by. So I think my biggest problem with the map is it's very predictable, and especially from a spectator standpoint, it very often plays out really, really similarly. It feels like oftentimes the first 10 minutes, you know exactly what's going to happen, and then the game kind of starts unless someone messes up. So that's the first point, which is obviously a negative. Second is the layout is pretty boring. It's just kind of a big square, and then we have creep camps along the side. So you're sort of, if you're in the mid game and the late game, forced to go one of two routes, which isn't very interesting. Either you have to make it to the opponent's side of the map and threaten their creeping, and if you have big enough of a lead, you can creep jack them easily. But if you don't have big enough of a lead, you just hang back, and then you both just creep your sides of the map until it's finally fully crept. And then there's maybe nothing to do. Maybe you're camping. Maybe you're sitting next to your expansion. The old Ancient Isles problem. You know, it's hard to get from one side to the other side, despite the small size, with how you can be at a disadvantage in an even game at least. So oftentimes you just creep your side and the opponent does his, and it's not that interactive unless you do have a lead, and then you can really dominate the opponent. So in an even game, it's oftentimes boring. And in a game where someone has a lead, it's oftentimes really overwhelming and you can't come back from a disadvantage. So it's like the worst of two worlds. And as you guys may notice, I'm shitting on AZ a lot. I do not like the map at all, honestly, from a spectator standpoint. Playing it, I think it's okay because you can feel like the map is fair, sort of. If you're having a good game, you're having a good game. If not, I guess you're going to pay for it. But it is so very predictable. So that's the one thing. The big camps everywhere. On the outside, the layout, not very interesting. The two cobalt camps in the middle, those are the only really frequently contested camps, especially when the second hero comes out. This is where we see a lot of battling going on. But this also has its own balance issues because it heavily favors strategies with the tavern hero. And that especially includes Night Elf, who almost always goes for a tavern hero, and pretty much only Night Elf. So this is very tavern hero focused, or tavern hero favored. We also have the two troll camps in the middle, but those are usually taken in the early game, or at least most of them are taken in the early game. So there's only really two two clear camps in the middle that you sort of have to contest. So it doesn't encourage that much competition and fighting unless you are ahead. As I said earlier, if you're ahead, this is the perfect map. Run across the map with speed stroll, use your ensnares, use your stormbolts, use your Nova frenzy ghouls. If you're ahead, this is the perfect map for you. But it is not very interactive. It's predictable, it's simple, and it's also so weird. Like there's also these massive red camps, which most games don't even get taken. And then there's this weird expansion, which has 20,000 gold. So once you have that expansion established, sometimes you just sit there and wait and don't do anything because the map is small. It's hard to creep, easy to creep jack. Yeah, that is my short summary of Amazonia. Not a big fan.
Mafe?
Well, it's pretty much a lot of what Remo just said. I could just repeat it once again. So I can't really speak as a player because I veto this map out of principle, because I think it's the worst map in the pool and the first that should be gone, even before Echo Isles for me. So I just find like that the map is just so repetitive, stale. If you want to go to creep check, you can't miss your opponent even if you wanted to. That's almost how it feels to me. And so one thing I as a map maker care a lot about are the early game creep routes, and here you night elves and humans, you go for the lab. It's not, there's basically no other option which you would even want to go. So I don't know, the map is just, I feel it's generic that's a positive thing, I would say. The map doesn't do much wrong, but there also isn't really much special or standing out about it. So I just think it's boring, and I would like to see it replaced with another map.
So as a map maker, you feel like there's nothing that's fundamentally wrong with the map. It's as a player and spectator that's you find it boring.
I would say that technically there's nothing wrong, and yeah, but it just doesn't create interesting games.
Yeah. Tenchi?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I think Amazonia and Echo Isles, for me, are kind of like very similar maps. They are both pretty small. They are both don't have too much creeps and have a very dependent early game, I think. So on Echo Isles, when you take aggressively camps, it's pretty hard, or you are pretty much in a disadvantage than the other player, because he has to go completely the other side to the complete other side of the map to get the same level. So yeah. Also, I still like the map kind of in the early game parts. I think it's pretty nice in the like for viewers in the early parts. It's also the only map that kind of features like an instant level 2 for pretty much everyone or every race who wants to. It's like this is one of the uniqueness of the map, and it's pretty much the most map with the most open space. So that's the only stuff that the map really has going. But I still think it's more balanced than the older maps.
Yeah. So to answer Carson, this is definitely one of the newer generation maps. I don't remember
Yes.
playing this in the old days, and then when I came back to Warcraft 3 a couple of years ago, I saw this and I was like, what is this shit? And
But I
then it
think
kind
it's
of... Sorry?
I think it's the oldest from the new ones.
Yeah. But definitely got introduced into the map after I retired. But yeah, like then I kind of warmed up to the map. I saw like some of the good players play well on it, so I got motivated. But as of late, I've definitely been vetoing it on ladder and don't appreciate it as much. It does feel pretty one-dimensional. It has some uniqueness, like you said, where you get the level 2 for every race pretty quickly. But I guess Terenas Stand also kind of has that. And like the rest of the map, yeah, it can feel boring at times. So I wouldn't be against this going out of the map pool, but then again, it's one of my vetoes, so I don't know if I should be one of the guys to say that. You know, maybe the ones that actually play it would be able to better talk about it. But yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to either this being removed from the map pool or being reworked, because that's the big question as well, which Remo touched on earlier. Like, do we want these maps to be reworked or completely removed out of the map pool? And like Remo, what would be your answer to that about this map?
I think it's a general question, not necessarily map specific. I would view it philosophically because if you do it in a case-by-case basis, almost every map can be improved, right? Like, even if you take a map like Concealed Hill, in my opinion, there's clear things there that can be improved. Only with Northern Isles is it really hard to actually find anything to improve, but every map can be improved. So I think we should view it more as a general motto or ethos of whether we should be trying to revamp old maps, improve old maps, or if we should just let them have their time in the past and accept that they have had their time in the spotlight and instead focus on new maps. This is the philosophy that I would prefer to follow. Appreciating the maps for the time that they had, but giving more space for new maps. So what I'm saying is, I would prefer to see map makers and the community not focus on improving old maps, but going for new ones rather, being a little bit more experimental, introducing new maps to the pool. In all of RTS, I think, especially compared to StarCraft, Warcraft's competitive map pool is extremely stagnant. We have the map pool changing so very, very rarely. So I think it would be good to have a concerted effort to remove older maps willingly and not work on them too much, but rather go for new ones.
Yeah, I think because we had so little support for such a long time, except for the community map makers, like with Blizzard not implementing maps themselves, we kind of are stuck in our ways that we like the old maps. So like we need to change TS and we need to change AZ sort of thing. But I think going towards new maps, like Remo said, is the right way. And we've seen that with, as you pointed out as well, Northern Isles, Concealed Hill. Concealed Hill may be the worst of the two, but still definitely one of the better maps in the pool. And those are both two brand new maps. So I think it is the right direction. And we should try to get away from being, so attached to these old maps.
Yeah, I think so too. But I still think it would be nice for some maps to have like small fixes. At the moment, you can't really fix them because they are played in Asia and tournaments, and you have two versions. Then it would be really nice if you have a council, and then the map really can get some slight patches if there's a problem. I don't really think that AZ is really patchable too much, like the boringness of the map. I think you really need to change too much, so you can rather make a new map. But on topic of AZ, I would like to ask if it's a problem to be like only having 2 gold mines. What's your take on this? Should all maps have at least 3? Should there be 1 still in the pool like Echo Isles, or?
Go ahead, Remo.
Yeah, this it's definitely a limitation of a map having only 2 gold mines, and I think it's a big risk because you take so much late game transition options out of a strategy. Just the way that the matchup naturally works out, some races are just going to be expanding first, like a human fast expansion against Undead, for example, like Night Elf against Orc, for example. There's plenty of examples for that in multiple matchups, and if you take away a third base option, then you're automatically putting a timer on the player who had to expand first if it goes into a two base counter expo kind of game, which we see a lot of nowadays. Now that can be interesting. We have seen those games plenty of times on Echo Isles where both have the expansion and the human has to keep on attacking because he's going to run out of money. And then there's this tug of war going back and forth. So that is the one upside of that kind of design, but it also limits you greatly and it limits the strategic variety you can have in the late game. I'm not sure if it's necessarily a bad design. It is one of the problems of Echo Isles, but not the biggest one, I would say.
Guys, it's been 19 minutes and we've done 1 map. At this rate, we're going to be here 5 hours. All right, what's the next one, Remo?
All right, let's go with the next one from the pool, Concealed Hill.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sorry, I talked way too much on my summary, so I'm going to start with just a few points. I think this is a really cool map. When it first came into the pool, I was very, very skeptical. 1 red camp in the middle, you can pull it out, you can trap it, weird. 5 gold mines, weird. Fountain was a big headache for me. I remember Fountain on Secret Valley, one of the worst maps of all time. So a lot of weirdness in this map, a lot of cool things as well. There are fountains, but they're really hard to clear. You can heal the fountain at nighttime, but everyone can. And it's also less healing than the normal fountain, so it's not as crazy strong. The red camp pull in the middle, I think that's one of the most annoying things about the map. I think this really should be changed. Either give the big boy creep way more HP, like the Magnetor dude on Northern Isles, or make him range. If you make him range, he has a shorter leash range and he will run back faster. So that's the one thing that bothers me. And also, if it's really late game and you can both make use of the fountains, that does favor some races quite a bit more, especially Orc after a fight with Spirit Link and Mountain Giants. So there are some issues with the map, some late game balance issues, I think, because of the fountain. But I also think people kind of blow it out of proportion. I don't think the fountains are that bad. It is, though, very well designed. The 5th base, I think, is brilliant. The camps are pretty hard. It's easy to put pressure on the opponent by taking camps away from them and positioning smartly. So I think this, all in all, is one of the best maps we have.
I would say one thing that bothered me is that the center is uneven. If you're at the top position and your opponent takes the center, you can siege it from above the trees. And that's, in my opinion, not the best thing, because it makes being on the top position better if you're losing that middle base, which sometimes, or like very often even, you're going to have to compete for eventually.
Yeah.
Carlson,
the idea of the 3rd base is kind of cool, but I think the actual maybe design of it, although the high ground is an interesting aspect, and the fact that you can hold it and get it and secure it and then you have it sort of thing, but maybe the actual just that middle section might be, if there is a big flaw, it could be in that, but still the idea of that gold mine that isn't neutral for both players, or that is neutral, I should say, right in the middle, that both players can sort of fight for in the late game is important. What's cool about this map, what I really like, which is a point on the side of introducing new maps as opposed to reworking old maps, is we've seen so much innovation since this map was introduced. Like, we started with the Focus 120 game where he was going Farseer Shadow Hunter and pulling all the red camps and hexing them with wyverns, and we all lost our minds. The creep routes have gotten really cool, like keeper players are starting to pull the gold mine early and then entangle and kill it. Like, there's been a lot of innovations to creep routes and sort of mid-game strategy. I think the biggest point for this map, and this is something me and Remo have talked about, and maybe you can touch on this a bit more clear, Remo, is the actual distance between not the expos, but like the main base and the expansion. Whereas getting from one main base to the other main base is a very long distance. Getting from your main base to your opponent's natural expansion is relatively short. So this kind of has a weird, maybe hit and runny dynamic in the mid to late game, and that's kind of interesting, but it does sort of favor the more aggressive player, I would say. If you're forced into a defensive position early, you kind of have to stay there for a long time. Maybe if you want to touch on that a bit more, Remo.
Yeah, I'm still not sure to this day whether it's very good, but it's definitely unique. Like, from a very emotional, selfish standpoint, what sometimes annoys me about the map is if I scout something and I see there's an opportunity to do something at his merchant or his gold mine to punish something, but you're on your side of that corner of the map. So you're at your merchant or your gold mine. Getting to their natural feels like it takes forever. And that's because of this pathway in the middle, the trees, the little bends you have to go around. But that's something you can compensate for. And what you mentioned, the different rush distances, main to main, main to expo, expo to expo. Despite the map being seemingly pretty clear with those 2 lanes vertically and one through the middle diagonally, I think this is really cool. I haven't gotten too concerned with the hit and run meta. When Moon was abusing all the orcs for like half a year, I was starting to get a little bit concerned, but I feel like the orcs have gotten better about this. And other than that, I think hit and run isn't the biggest problem. I think it's a unique aspect about the map, so I more appreciate it than get annoyed by it. Though, if you are in the bottom right corner, getting to the top left and vice versa is extremely hard.
Yeah, Chalivilik in the chat mentioned a valid point as well, where he says that the top has better position for a defensive town hall, or like, yeah, I guess if you're human, but maybe it can affect also other races, because you got like a lot of trees, so you can make it more at the top. Whereas here, if you make it on the left side, at the bottom part, you're not gonna have many trees to work with, and it's gonna be like wide open on the other side as well. Tenchi.
Yeah, I think that's something that would be easily fixable. I still think this is one of the best maps in the pool. It has some kind of uniqueness and problems at the same time. what Remo said, the red spot in the middle, it's kind of cheesy to pull him out, but it also adds to the map because the map has just 8 creep spot for every player and 1 unique one, and you have 1 extra spot you can do a little bit earlier, and which gives a very nice item. And it's also kind of hard to change the creeps. There are not that many that would fit in this tie set. Only maybe the Sash Squash. He's a level 9 melee with rejuvenation, but I don't think it's much better. Or a Golem, which is kind of hard to do. You could maybe change the position of the Tavern a little to stop players from blocking it in so easily. Yeah. And I don't think the middle expansion is really fixable. I know it's kind of unfair that you have a little advantage on the top side. I didn't see it that often, or maybe not at all. I don't remember.
Oh, it is
but I think-
fixable though. Imagine if they
How?
increase the amount of trees above that space here above the gold mine. Then it's gonna be much harder to siege from the low ground.
That was me, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's hard to keep the layout of the map then. So one path would be maybe a bit smaller, or you need to stretch the map to the top side a bit. Yeah. Also, I think the map could have a little better, like the realms could be more visible. It's really hard to know where the high ground really starts and where it ends.
Yeah.
And all map makers that are making maps now, they know that this should be very clear where the high ground starts and where it ends.
Matthew?
So for me, really, when I first saw this map, the standout features were the fountains, because back then conventional wisdom was that fountains mean the map is heavily orc favored, and I don't think anyone said it about Concealed Heal so far. So it really goes to show that it depends not just the feature itself is important, but also how you use it in the context of the map. Like on Nullwood or Lost Temple or Secret Valley, like the fountain was always very easily creepable with well, maybe not on LT, but on the other maps with a Blade Master, and here you can't do it. And this immediately takes away a lot of the appeal of the fountain for orcs. So here the fountains are well used for healing during the night, or just trapped very late to the game. So it really goes to show what is possible if you are smart about how to make maps.
Yeah. On my part, I would say I'm okay with the map. It's just the fountains that bother me mostly. I wish maybe the regeneration rate was like lower or something, or maybe there would be something else than a fountain, but I'm not a big fan of them. As a human player, you know, if I face an orc, or sometimes even against elf, they can make my life hell.
Giants.
A fixed rate would be nice, not a percentage-based one.
Yeah, even like if you fast expand and you face mass tier 1 from elf, like they can save all hunts, send them back to the fountain all the time. And then like somehow you survive the night and it's like, yes, finally it's day, they don't have moonwells anymore or fountain, and then you use a moonstone, it's like, what are you kidding me right now? Like, yeah, so the fountain's my main objection from this map, but other than that, I don't have much growl with it other than the stuff we mentioned with the center base and maybe the trees like around the expo. And yeah, the creep pool is a little bit stupid. I wish we could make that big ogre in the center a little smarter, so he actually would defend himself a little better when anyone tries to abuse the pool. Okay, let's check out the next one, Rima.
Yeah, the last classic one before we go into the new maps, and that is all of our favorite, Echo Isles. The oldest map in the pool, I believe. It was changed a little bit not too long ago by Blizzard to make it, I think, a little more symmetrical. But yeah, still very far from perfectly symmetrical. The map underwent a lot of changes years back. I think there were like 3 fountains on this map once upon a time. Not the case anymore. But yeah, it's very small. There's very few creep camps. There's especially, which makes my blood boil every time. There's only 2 camps you can really contest in the middle, and it's north and south. And then there's this big real estate around the tavern where there's just nothing you can do. And normally both players just creep their sides, and after 9 minutes into the game, you're kind of done with the creeping, and then you just sit next to your expansion and you sort of wait. Sometimes it can be interesting. When I mentioned earlier, the back and forth between the bottom bases when the player with less time in the gold mine notices he has to fight. That is the one redeeming factor about the map, but it just seems so outdated. There's a million claws on this camp. There's a really low variety of item drops outside of that. There's no lab here for a shredder, which some races really need. There's no zeppelin to make things more interesting. There is a merc camp, and I think that's okay designed. The marketplace was back then super unique, but normally you only buy claws there because, well, you can almost only find claws. And then there's these weird dead ends with the turtle, which is all heavy armor, so it's super hard for everything to creep, and you feel like you're wasting time. It's a weird map. It's, I think, the most janky one, the strangest one. The one redeeming factor that it has is that it's a very easy fast expansion, which gives it a lot more fast expansion possibility to differing races, which normally can't pull it off so easily. But especially I feel when you're playing it, it feels so limited. It feels so one-dimensional. It feels like there's so little opportunity to be creative and do smart things. And from a observer standpoint, also I think it's pretty repetitive. Although that back and forth, as I said, the tug of war thing is kind of cool. It just feels like this map is too old, too outdated to me.
How about we put a gold mine in the center or like at 6 o'clock? That's
no, Todd, we need new maps.
Carson, what do you think?
All right. Well, I think this map, we can be happy with what it's given us. And it gave us the inspiration, I'm assuming, for Northern Isles with the single shop, with the marketplace. So we got something very, very good out of Echo Isles, but it's been changed so many times. It still isn't mirrored perfectly. The trees on the right side of the natural expansion are still limited to what you can build on compared to the left side. There was a game like 12 years ago on the left side expansion where Ted just built a necropolis there at like 1 minute into the game and then tower rushed him. You wouldn't be able to do that on the right side. So if the spawns were flipped in that game, we would never have seen a weird game like that. There's a lot of wacky stuff. This is one of the few maps we see like draws on. We've seen those at the professional level, people just having to regame because no one wants to attack. They wait until the gold mines are out. There's an anecdote that I have that I played a game the other day, and I was playing against an undead player, and he expanded, and then he built 8 towers, and he just sat behind the 8 towers until the gold mine ran out, and then he just attacked, and that was the game. We just both waited until we were 100 food, the gold mines ran out, we both had towers, and we both attacked, and it's like, okay, there's one fight, and the game's over.
Did
and
you
that's
win?
actually No, I lost.
Yeah, you sound like you lost, and you're salty.
Yeah. I moved into his towers 20 minutes after waiting for the gold mine to run out. But anecdote over. But that's a common thread on this map. And like I said, I think we should be happy with what it's given us. Lots of claws for me as an orc player. I can be happy with that. But yeah, it's pretty boring, pretty stalematey. A lot of issues with symmetry, a lot of issues with the creeps. And the one shop was cool for a while. I think that was the one redeeming thing, and the quicker expansion, as Remo pointed out as well.
Tenshi?
Yeah, I also think it's just too old. Has not enough creep spots, so you always end up with pretty low heroes. You also can't really, not that effectively play triple hero. I think this symmetry is kind of okay. It works pretty okay there, even despite it's not perfect symmetry, but it could be improved maybe a little. Yeah, there are just like, I don't know, 7 spots on this map. One is very hidden behind the natural. The green spot is, well, I don't know even if you can call it a spot. And it's kind of repetitive and boring, but I still think it's more balanced than TM and Turtle Rock, because I think most races can play the map effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think why it should stay. And yeah, TM and Turtle Rock should be the first ones to get removed.
That's a really good point, actually, because it is more balanced. People hate the map for the way it's played, but it might actually be more balanced for all 4 races overall than some of the other maps. Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, it's not like one race has to veto it. Maybe Undead, but
Yeah, it's a
many
very
Undead think
specific debate of balance versus entertainment,
yes.
which like can mean very different things. Mafe?
Yeah, I don't like this map too much either. I'm personally not a fan of these tug of war style games. But I think what's unique about this map is, for example, the symmetry. Like, it's the only map, I believe, which has mirror symmetry. And
Yes.
about the low amount of resources and creeps. Well, it's possible to make an argument that this could be seen as a feature and as something that makes the map stand out. I just I'm also not convinced that in the long run the map delivers interesting games. I personally enjoy the first 10 minutes, but after that it rarely gets entertaining and often very predictable. When both players secure an expansion, all too often you just have to wait until something happens, and that's not really a gameplay style that I enjoy playing or watching.
Yeah. Neo asked an interesting question. He said, counterpoint, Echo Isle produces a lot of epic games. What can we learn from Echo Isle to implement in new maps? I guess
it's a blessing and a curse, kind of, isn't it? Because it's the same reason that it kind of sucks, maybe. I don't know.
I think it has a lot to do with the limited amount of resources, not so much in terms of creeps, but rather in terms of expansion. Like this one guy feeling under pressure, having to attack because he's going to mine out first, which we touched on that shortly earlier, can be seen as a problem, but also as a feature. So I think the axis symmetry has a lot to do with this. So
Yes.
as they said, it's axis symmetry, only the case on Echo Isle. So that means you start on the same point horizontally, and then you expand and creep southward in this case. And you're kind of always close to each other. You're never chasing each other around the clock in the point symmetry model, which all the other maps follow. So I think the axis symmetry is really cool and is largely responsible for why anybody still wants to play this map. And it's something that is very rarely explored in map maker decisions, but we do have a new one coming up later, which won last year's mapping contest, which has that design with the axis symmetry, and I think was mentioned before by Care, the map maker, of trying to be Echo Isles, but just good.
Do you guys
Yeah,
want to... Yeah, go ahead.
Just to touch on the symmetry, yes, indeed. The upside is, of course, if you put creeps on the symmetry axis, they will naturally be contested, and that's something interesting and something which we rarely see on other maps. There's just one market creep at a marketplace, one creep at a shop, and whoever gets this creep camp has secured an advantage. While on other maps, there's like everyone has his own half of creeps. Some of them are not that clearly belonging to one player, but everybody has the same chances to get the creeps later on if it doesn't take them early on. So there could be, in Echo Isles, there could be more than just two creeps on the symmetry axis. This would make it more interesting. For example, maybe you could fit a creep camp south of the shop. There would be space for another camp, and this could be a late game camp, for example. But yeah, this mirror symmetry is definitely underused.
Yeah. I really like the symmetry of this map. But I think the other symmetry, the point symmetry, is better. But I would still like to have at least one of the of this kind of style maps in the pool, because you have really unique creep spots. You always will have in the middle unique creep spots that one player will get, the other not. But I like it better when the symmetry is from a corner to the other corner, not so from bottom left to top right. I think that's a better design.
Okay. Yeah, personally, I would love to see this map go. I've played it for like 15 years or whatever, so like I'm so fed up with it. Like it has changed a couple of times. There used to be like multiple fountain. There was like the version with a mana fountain or something. I remember I played Azuops. I played Azuops at a tournament. I went Pala first. And I just kept sending it to Acolytes, Holy Lighting, 5 of them, back to Mana Fountain, back to Holy Lighting.
That's a fun game.
Yeah, he loved it.
I think I've seen that replay. I think it's casted on YouTube.
It was terrible, man. It was terrible. But yeah, I hope it goes. All right, what's next?
All right, so now we're gonna for the first time, venture into the newer maps, which are not currently part of the tournament map pool. But this one, people are probably somewhat familiar with already because we have seen in some tournaments, and it is part of Ladder. It is Autumn Leaves, the creation by our very own Tenchi, who is in the call here with us. Autumn Leaves has been part of War 3 Champions ladder for 2 or 3 seasons now, something like
I
that,
think more. It's started in the second one. Was
and
added.
has undergone a lot of changes. And as is every new map, was a little critically viewed by a lot of the community, but I think a lot of the community came around. And well, I guess I'm starting off. I think it's a really good map. Has some interesting spins. It has 2 expansion options. One much easier to creep, but more attackable. There are 2 unique neutral buildings in the middle, one merc camp, one lab. Importantly, there is a merc camp on the map if you need it, but it's not too easy to do, which greatly favors, not too easy to do early, which greatly would favor Night Elf and Human. There's 2 shops on the map, which had been repositioned recently, which I think are now in a way better spot. The item spread is good. I think a few versions ago, some camps in the middle perhaps were a little too rewarding, but it was evened out across the board a little bit more. The size seems decent. We haven't seen it too much in tournament play yet, but yeah, I think this is all in all a good map. How exciting it's going to be in pro games, how exhilarating the meta is going to be, hard to tell. But I think this is just a solid map all the way through. And I think this is the number 1 frontrunner to replace some of the old maps.
I'd like to go next, actually, on this,
Yeah, go ahead.
because I feel like when a map is new like this, it's very hard for like all the players that have played maps for a very long time to really accept that there's like a new map and play it a lot. So it made me really sad to see that Autumn Leaves was almost not played at all during W3 Champions playoffs. Almost every time it wasn't picked, not because it's a bad map, but because I think a lot of other maps are like imbalanced, and everybody wants to pick the maps that are good for them. So they'll prioritize these, and then they'll not prioritize Autumn Leaves at all. And you know, like he wasn't picked, I feel like a lot of the time because of that. So like the map almost gets penalized for being like more balanced than most. I don't know. I was actually looking forward to asking Neutron and Hitman about this, if they thought the same, or like if they tell me like I'm out of my mind and you know, like this map is super imbalanced. But in my experience, it feels more neutral than a lot of other maps that are out there. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think about this. One thing though, like I love that, you know, compared to Echo Isle, there's like so many camps you have to compete like for the center sometimes, but you can also go to the corners. You got like other expansion options and stuff. I would say though, here on the left, what about the small green camp here, you know, on that little island here, and then here on the right side? It does feel like
Another
it's,
one, you mean? Or
like on the, like where I'm pointing right now on the left, you see?
yeah, one
Here
more? Or
and here, yeah,
which
one more
one?
small green camp, you know, like
Oh.
throw it in there. So there's really
It
stuff
would
like
be-
everywhere.
Would be the map with the most creep spots then. It already has 10. But
Yeah, well,
yeah, it would be possible, of course.
yeah. Yeah, actually, Tenchi, I'm curious about your opinion of the map that you've developed. Like, I'm sure you have like maybe some insights, but how did you feel seeing it almost never be played in W3
Well-
Champions playoffs? And the one time that it was played, I got obliterated by Happy. We didn't even see the map at all.
Yeah. I expected it. I know I'm a player myself also. Not
You mean
the
me
best-
getting obliterated or the map?
No. Just I expected that the map would not be picked that much. But I was really happy that it was the first map we saw Grubby playing it, and I don't know, maybe 2 times. I was just happy that it was played at all. Yeah, the map got many patches. I'm really I'm really like to patch the map. I think you can improve the map always, pretty much. And it's, in my opinion, good to go from season to season and patch it till players like the map and it feels neutral. What you said. I think that's the thing I want to go for. That it's pretty much a neutral map where every race can play, but Human maybe struggles a little. But I'm not too sure about it. Maybe just on the low level. But
We struggle on
yeah.
every map, bro.
Yeah, I know. I'm human myself. But yeah, the map also gets a patch also next season again, but it's not too much this time. It's just removing a bit of the space because it's very open in many, very, very open. I tried to make it a little bit more position based on some positions. And also I removed the spider because it's so unrewarding to just get a book and have poison there. And the creep camp also not being really rewarding. And yeah, one thing I also think that really needed to change was the merc camp, because you have a merc camp there. It kind of shares the symmetry of Northern Isles. I actually made the spots harder. One patch or two patches, I don't know. But so people don't play only in the middle. That was the one big problem when the map played first. Many people said it did feel like Amazonia. With just everyone going for the natural, going for the middle cube spots, and that was most part of the map. So that's why I spread out a bit. But the merc camp is used mostly never because it's too late in the game. So that's why in the next patch you will be able to pull it and get the get the creep, because there's no ensnare, there's nothing really that hinders you. You can easily pull it and get a Shadow Priest or so in Human versus Orc if the opponent lets you. So maybe I hope it makes the map a little bit better.
I'm interested. You had just one little point. I'm interested your thoughts on that. You talked about Grubby the first time they played it in the War 3 Champions, and he did that trick on the gold mine. I'm not 100% sure if you fix that or not, but I'm interested your thoughts if there are little tricks like that, like Twisted Meadows pulling the Rock Golem, Concealed Hill.
Oh, can you still hear him? I don't.
Yeah, I think he just disconnected. What kind of gold mine trick is he talking about?
Yeah, because I don't know either.
Grubby pulled the level 5 ogre from the middle natural to the small creep and the small trees, the two in the middle, and surrounded it with 2 wolves.
So a 3-point surround?
Yeah, 3 points around against the.
Well, I mean, that's just a normal move, though. You can do it against any tree line, right?
I did really like it. I was very happy to see a trick on the map. I really like stuff like this. I'm not really a fan of the rock golem pull, but stuff like this I like. But it's pretty hard to do because you need to attack the ogre 2 times because he will cast Bloodlust first, and sometimes I don't think it's really reproducible 100% of the time. It was quite hard.
Mafe?
Yeah, I think these pulls are actually nice, and if there's a new map, it always gets scrutinized much more than existing maps, and if you tried, you could probably pull off a similar trick on many existing maps and no one would complain about it. So I think it's nice. It's an upside and not a downside. So about this map, in particular, what stands out are the gold mines, the location of the natural expansion, which is right in the line towards your opponent, and it's something that's I don't think I've ever seen on any other map, but it's of course very interesting. And the good thing about it here is it's a new feature, but it's not forced upon the player. So whoever wants to play standard still has the option to go to the other expansion, which in terms of creeps, in terms of location, is much more standard. So it's a good way to test new features like this. And I think so far I don't see an obvious downside so far. So yeah, it's a good way to add 1 or 2 new features, like also the central merc camps, but not to do too much at once.
Remo?
Oh, I started, but sure. Yeah, it's a good
did?
map. Yeah, I did start.
Thank you.
It's been in the pool for a long time, and I think it should absolutely replace some of the maps that we want to remove, because that's kind of a. I don't know if you said this clearly, but this is part of the purpose of this town hall, to get this conversation rolling, get the community engaged, and give our thoughts. Because tournament map pool changes should be done at some point, and I think, and I believe we think, it's sort of time. And I think this is the best candidate to do it. Now, I would love to have 2 maps removed and 2 maps added. Don't know if that's too extreme for some people, but yeah, just a really good map, really well rounded, nothing too crazy that I can see, and it's yeah, good map. There we go.
Do you think that if tomorrow DreamHack announced that they are taking out Echo Isle and Amazonia and they replace them with Autumn Leaves and then another map, what do you think the community reaction would be, and what do you think the players' reaction would be?
That's a good question, but also something that has to be. So I think there's going to be negative reaction to a certain extent, regardless of how good the map is, regardless of how bad the map that we remove is, because people like to stay with what they're used to. We have seen this now on ladder plenty of times. Like we gave Autumn Leaves and Ruins of Azshara a long time for players to play, but there's no real reason because they're not in any bigger tournament map pool. Most people still just veto it because, you know, human being is a creature of habit. Most people just aren't used to it. So as soon as we remove something and add something new, I think people are going to be critical. I was in that same boat with the last map pool change when AI and Todorock were removed, which were clearly not good maps, and Concealed and Northern made it in. I was also critical. I was like, is this good? This Ogre pull is weird. What's up on Northern Isles with the Drake in the corners? That was changed later. I was very hesitant to accept the new ones, but I was sooner or later one of the people who really liked them, who love the maps actually. And we have to, at some point, introduce innovation. And you know what? Maybe we're going to misstep once or twice. Maybe it turns out to be a bad map, although there's no reason to believe it for Autumn Leaves. But we have to shake it up a little bit. We have to, get some new maps, and even if some people don't like it.
I mean, did anyone ever miss Ancient Isles? Even for a second?
Not me.
So I believe if we have a better map, I'm sorry. If we replace Amazonia, then I don't think 6 months after the change, if the new map is just new and better, then nobody will really miss Amazonia.
Yeah. Carson, you were saying?
Yeah, sorry. How much of my question went through?
I don't know, but you froze in a really funny frame when you finally froze.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It might happen again. We'll never know. The anticipation, man. Okay, so sorry. My question was, if we're still on Autumn Leaves, we saw Grubby doing that trick at the expansion. There's other tricks like on Concealed Hill, which we mentioned was a problem. Twisted Meadows, I've heard some people say that's a problem when Orc pulls the Golem. I'm wondering on your philosophy of, will you patch out little tricks if people find them, or will you try to realize if they're balanced or not? Are you going to try to get rid of these? Because I think they're really interesting, actually.
Absolutely the same. I'm really against patching stuff like this in almost any game. It's very interesting. It's almost always some hard to pull off tricks. Like the Ogre, I said it's not too easy to reproduce the pull because he will cast Bloodlust first and he don't follows immediately. And also 3 units around against trees. It's not too easy. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, Remo, what's next? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one stuff I would like to say about Autumn Leaves is I would like to see more humans try to expo on the corner for like a better. It gives a better leveling, level 3, and I would just like to see how it works out. And also, one misconception of the map that I see very, very often, even today, is that the map is small. The map is one of the largest in the pool. It's larger than LR, it's larger than CH. It's almost as large as Northern Isles. Playable area, not rush distance. But it's certainly not small.
That's what she said. All right, Remo.
All right, next map. This is going to be the first one that most players are not familiar with. This is Brightwater Oasis. So I would suggest we first look at the overview of the picture of the map, and then we go into the editor to show it a little bit more in-game. Now, this is a map that I have come to realize that I have a bit of a biased view on. I was part of the judging team 2 years ago when this won the Hive mapping contest, and I absolutely Love this map. So let me give first all the praise that I can give. So it's a 2-player map, obviously, and there's 2 gold mines each, making it a 6 gold mine total map, which is sort of standard, if we go by Northern Isles Last Refuge standards nowadays. It has a very unique look. It uses, I think, the Barrens tile set, and it's called Brightwater Oasis. So there's an oasis in the middle, and there's like arid areas on the outskirts. There's trees and stuff, and I think it's, in my opinion, the most beautiful map that's ever been made, which in a competitive map pool isn't the most important thing. I realize this, but I think it's important still to a certain extent. If you can have a map which is pleasing to look at, I think it's always better. And I think this is the most pleasing looking map perhaps ever. Now let's get more into the nitty gritty of the map. There are a fairly healthy amount of evenly distributed camps, I would say. Especially Tenchi likes pointing out that there's some weirdness with some camps going on, which I can agree with, although I don't think it's that big of a deal. But there's a few specialties which I think makes this map very cool. First of all, much unlike Echo Isles and some other maps, there's a lot of camps in the middle which are very valuable and encourage player interaction. I think this is one of the most important things to have in a map. We see the Northern Isles with the shop and the marketplace in the middle, which normally always leads to some kind of fight on AZ to a lesser extent with the kobolds, but there's stuff in the middle to fight about, not just stuff in the edges of the map. In fact, if you're in the middle, almost everything is contestable. Now you can say the lab, if it spawns right next to your base, and the green camp, those aren't really contestable. I suppose that's true, but pretty much everything is. So like on Northern Isles, if you're in the middle where it's valuable to be, you can get anywhere if you think it's valuable to get there. So player action-wise and interesting gameplay dynamics-wise, I think this is a very promising feature for the map. And the most unique thing about the map is that the shop and lab can spawn semi-randomly in one of 2 locations. On the overview, we see this. There's not actually 2 labs on the map, or a total of 4, but there's in total 2, meaning the lab will either spawn on L1 or L2, and the shop will either spawn on S1 or S2. So it's semi-random. The building is going to be in one of 2 places, but which one exactly it is, you don't know until you load into the game. But unlike other random spawns, like for example Twisted Meadows, with player spawns, on this map, from the first second of the game, you see right away where the buildings are, and you can react instantly with your build and with your strategy around it. So
you can see through the fog of war, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever people hear something like random spawns, they have quickly a distaste for things like that. But with this system, with how it's implemented, I think that's very unique and very interesting. Another important thing for metagame is expansion. This expansion is easy to creep, not very rewarding, but it's easy to creep. So it's sort of like Last Refuge, maybe a tiny bit harder. But like Last Refuge, it is also fairly close to your opponent's main base, where they can push it fast. I think it's very, very comparable, in fact, to Last Refuge. However, there is no lab here on this map, which on LR there is, but in most cases, you can't creep it early on LR anyways. Those are all the benefits. There's a few weird things about the map, certainly, and it has been criticized by some people for that. And I think Tenchi would love to tell you about it.
Yeah, I don't want to be too negative about this map because Muff is also here. I just like his newer maps a little more. For me, it's personally just a map like we had some years ago when Blizzard put on a new map and all players like, what's this shit again? No weird creeps. So and the map vanishes and no one plays it, and people are waiting or start to be biased about new maps. That's what I don't like. In my opinion, I don't think random neutral spawns don't really have a place in competitive. Just in my opinion. Yeah, I don't like this in competitive.
I'm
for me, it's
curious.
a no-go.
Could you ever see it as, on Nullwood, you never know whether the fountain's going to be mana or health. But once you load into the game, you can see what color the lanterns are around the fountain, and then you can tell whether it's health or mana. Could you ever look at this map and think similarly, that the fact that you're able to see it through the fog of war, you can adapt to it, and then maybe it has a place?
I don't think so. I think it's too random with the creep routes and the lab that you may want to have. And yeah, I think Warcraft has randomness enough that's not always balanced. And this is, for my taste, too much. I also don't like the small corridor pathways behind the lab, and not the lab, the goblin shop, and on the right side behind the Red Expo. It's for me too small and too long. And also on the right side are creeps, which I don't like. They are not really in the tree line enough for my taste. But it's still a very beautiful map. I have to agree.
Okay, so since I made this map, I like it, so I'm slightly biased. So what can I say? So I think the main downside for me is not any, or why I see that this map might be problematic if put into a competitive map pool, is not any one particular feature. It's more like the combination or the fact that there are too many of them at the same time put into one single map. For example, with the labs and the shops, the random spawn, you can make an argument, that you cannot predict. Maybe you have prepared your pro player, you prepare for a tournament, you pick this map, you have a good creep route, and for one possible spawn, and then you're just unlucky, and in this game the buildings spawn in the wrong location and it doesn't work. This might obviously not be ideal. However, with the labs, at least I would say both are within same distance of the main base and will be grabbed at some point rather early on. But okay. The other thing is the expansion. It's quite far away from the main base and can easily be sieged. So and the late game expansion is like between the main and the natural expansion. That's also unusual. And I've seen people who insisted that they will take the red camp on the high ground as the natural expansion, which I never imagined anyone would do that. But okay. And
Shadow 4 creeping is one hell of a drug. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. So what's not clearly visible from this overview is, as you might guess from the tiles, that there are many unusual creeps. Obviously, I try to make the creep camps possible, and I would say like half of the creeps are more like standard creeps in a different skin, because actually many of the creeps in Warcraft 3, which look different, have exactly the same statistical gameplay values. Yeah, but then, these pathways are of course also unusual. I think they are similar to Echo Isle, where they are no big deal, but they also, of course, don't offer too much. So if this would be the first map to put into a new competitive pool, I could perfectly understand why many players would say, what is this? This is so far from everything we know in so many details that we don't want to play it. However, I still believe that in the long run, so if we were in like an environment like StarCraft 2, where we would get like 5 or 6 new maps every half a year. I don't know if that's correct. Maybe it's what you can tell me, because I never really was that much into the scene. But if we had a lot of many new maps on a regular basis, then I believe this map could still work. But
yes,
right now, if we only have a very limited number of opportunity, maybe it's better to give a less unconventional map a chance first to gain the trust of players.
In StarCraft, I don't remember exactly. It's been a while since I've played in CAS, but I think they have 7 maps and they rotate out 3 or 4 every season. And there's quite a few seasons in a year, usually 3, 4. So they're changing maps all the time. Like a map that was there a season, like 2 seasons later, it's not there anymore. So they keep changing maps all the time, but they have also like a lot more resources, a lot more players.
They also added a really experimental map last season.
Did they?
Yeah, with gold mines where you can build on both sides.
Oh yeah, I saw they did like some stuff like this, or like in the past with like the rich minerals and Vespine and stuff. Carson dropped again. What was exactly the reasoning behind doing the random labs and merchants starting
Well,
location.
The reason was I thought it would be fun if it could be made to work. So I tried it. And yeah, apparently I had some success with it, as Remo likes it. I believe Newton likes it also. And for whatever reason, Blizzard liked it so much they put it into everyone's Warcraft 3 map folder. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
some
In the
things
end,
we
I
haven't
mean-
mentioned. Like, for example, there's like high grounds behind one of the shop positions, which is like a typical StarCraft run-by path, something we're not too used to from Warcraft 3, which is a little weird to some players. You know, I mean, I think, Muffy, you made the argument before that on Equalize there's something similar, which I guess, but here it's also a high ground. Then there's some camps which are very different. Like, for example, there's harpies in the corner, which can curse you twice and sleep you twice. But the curse is weakened, and you can wake up the slept target. But it's a little bit weird, you know, for people who aren't too familiar with it. I think the big wildkin at the red camp has like a stomp or something. And there's lizards, which have splash damage. So I definitely agree with the fact there's quite a few things different with this map. But I think at least that most of these differences don't really have a negative impact on gameplay once people get a little bit used to it. But the point that Muffin made, that if we have a limited amount of new maps that can come in, maybe it's wiser to go by more of a trusted and narrow path for the first few new additions, at least.
All right.
I would really like to hear Todd's opinion about sleep and curse and fairy fire.
Not a big fan.
Not a big case.
Well,
Yes,
actually,
same.
I think I played this map maybe once or something, and then I'm like, it feels for me like I have no reason to try it any more than that, because it's not in any of the map pools. I don't play many tournaments. It's mainly Meisterschaft that I play, and then occasionally one or two other tournaments. Obviously, if this was a Meisterschaft map, I would have to learn it. So a big argument can be made for these maps to be truly, you know, tried out, so that they need to be implemented in some tournament map pools. Because otherwise, we're never going to see players like do the effort to actually try them out. I'm one of the few that plays Autumn Leaves regularly on ladder, but it doesn't feel like there's so many competitive players that actually do, and that's why in tournaments we don't see it. And I feel like I could end up liking this map, but I just don't want to put in the effort of learning it when I'm never going to have to play it in any tournament, despite not playing many of them. So, yeah.
Yeah, but
Sorry?
that's a topic that applies to pretty much every new map, and not just to this one, of course. But I think it's sort of a chicken and egg problem, because players don't try new maps. Competitive pro players don't play new maps until they are in tournaments, and tournaments are, for good reason, somewhat hesitant to introduce new maps unless they have been tested by pro players. So somebody has to jump first.
Carson, what's going on?
I'm sorry, I found the culprit and I removed it while my PC was turned off, and I'm back and I think I'm good to go. This
Wait, what?
RAM is going in the garbage.
It's your
Going in the
computer?
garbage.
Your computer was
We were
crashing?
just on the
Yeah.
closing thoughts on Brightwater. Carson, do you have any
Yes.
thoughts on the map, or?
I think the randomness is cool, and I think we're back to the sort of dichotomy of player spectator, sort of. I think the players might be angry at the randomness, as they are on Knollwood. Although, you know, the spectator might actually enjoy that sort of randomness. And I think it being more of a macro map, it having more gold mines, is also a cool little dynamic. But I haven't played it yet, so I'll have to play it. But I think the randomness, if players can stop being drama queens, I think is a enjoyable thing. But players are drama queens. I am as well. You heard me complain about EI earlier because I lost a game on it. You know, that's how we are.
Okay, what do we want to do next, Remo?
All right, so the next one is the third of the new contestants, if you will.
Well, we don't do this map in the map editor, right?
No, I think we should, because people are very unfamiliar with it. So it's Ruins of Azshara. So I think we open the overview and look at it there first, and then maybe go into the map editor to have a closer look. It is part of War 3 Champions, but I feel like nobody plays this one.
Yeah, actually, I might have been talking about this map earlier I think I played Krav one time on this map, and then he took like an easy expo, and then just like it was such a long rush distance, and he just like ran me over, and I was like, I'm never gonna play this map ever again. But yeah, like same argument can be made as I made for the previous map. Like this is not in tournament, so it's like there's not so much incentive to try it out. As far as the maps, yeah, like I just said, the rush distance felt very long to an opponent's expansion, and the expansion maybe didn't seem that hard to take. And it's like the distance between the main and expo, I don't know if it's like standard, but with the new militia timer, it does feel hard for human to defend their expo, I thought, on this.
Yeah, so Ruins of Azshara, I see a few issues with this map. It is pretty well made. Certainly pretty. The glistening sunlight is kind of a cool touch. The obelisks in the middle. A personal thing for me, when everything's brown, I'm never a fan of that. But maybe that's just me. But there's also some other issues with the map that I see. First and foremost, there's a merc camp on this map, which is early, creepable, very easy for one of two races. That's Night Elf and Human with Militia and Ancient of War, the two races that already benefit the most from having an early mercenary camp creep. Now, to be precise, you don't get level 2 from creeping the merc camp, but right next to it is a green camp, which you can creep without Militia, without Ancient of War, and can easily get your item at your level 2 there. The item isn't as impactful. It's tomes and claws and stuff, but having early Mercamp access, again, for Human and Night Elf, for those two races especially, is really, really, really beneficial, which I think is oftentimes a balance issue, which is why, for example, we see Terenas Stand vetoed so often, and very often it's only Night Elves and Humans comfortable with the map, which I think could be a problem here as well. So that's what the first thing that stands out to me. Second is there's two different expansion spots to choose from, which is kind of interesting. But if you look at them closer, sticking with so if you're bottom left, taking bottom right expansion is really hard because the camp is much harder and it's further away. So actually, I don't even know if that's a possibility. Maybe you are forced into this middle base in the middle of the map. Maybe that's just a feature that I was misinterpreting. But my gripe with the map mostly comes from an emotional standpoint, kind of, and looking at the creep camp location. So after playing this map a few times myself and seeing it, it seems sort of like AZ very big to me. Not to the same extent, but with some similar factors. Most of the big camps are on the corner. Red camp in the corner, the big gold mine in the corner, the lab is in the corner. The merchant isn't exactly in the corner, but it's the same quadrant. If you are smack bang in the middle of the map, there's no reason to hold position. On Northern Isles, it is always valuable to hold middle position because you're next to the shop. You can contest the few invos that there are. And if you're in the middle, which is valuable to be, then you can get everywhere on the map easily. Here, it seems like when you're in the middle, you can only get to the green camps easily. And even for getting to the green camps, you have to walk around this little tree line. So it's not even that easy to creepjack your opponent there, especially usually if you're in the middle early, it's nighttime. When you're in the middle here, you have the chance of getting Wand of Illusion or Slippers of Agility. It doesn't really feel like it's that rewarding. The most rewarding corner in the map by far is bottom right and top left. There's the red camp and there's 3 yellow camps. So it feels like if you're doing anything other than being there in the mid game / late game, you're wasting your time. And that again is kind of exacerbating the map control problem that AZ also has. If you're super far ahead, you can bully your opponent away from these camps, which is sort of good, but as soon as you are more conservative, you're almost always going to be splitting the map. One goes in the one side, one goes in the other. There's no big reason to risk a lot trying to contest the middle because, as I mentioned before, if you have middle control, not much you can do with that. All right, that's my first couple of points. I'm gonna let you guys take over.
Mafe.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Carlson, go ahead.
Well, I don't have much to say, but I was just gonna point out maps that have like a very easily accessible merc camp as well as an easily accessible expansion although maybe harassable, you do sort of get tilted towards these very easily fast expanding maps. Mountain King first, maps like Echo Isles, Terenas Stand. So the one thing I notice is just Merc Camp's right there, expansions right there. Maybe that tilts towards that sort of play, which could be interesting, but not always the most balanced in all matchups. And also, I think it's very pretty. I like the little corner things. That's all I got.
Mafe?
All right. So the first thing about the tile sets are obviously some matter of personal taste, and well, some people just prefer green maps because that's what they're used to, or because they look nicer, which is definitely something that's understandable. But on the other side, I think the tile set really shouldn't matter too much when we decide about whether a map is good or bad. So I also think that the Merc camps are in the current state weird in the sense that, well, I'm also mostly a human player, and when I'm playing this map, I creep the Merc camp, and then I'm like, oh, I really hope that there's a Death Knight or Farseer coming to harass me, because if they harass me, I can buy the troll, dispel a skeleton, and dispel a wolf, and immediately get level 2, even without taking this additional green camp. And it's something weird, where the player who's going to harass actually might give an advantage to the player who is being harassed. At least that's how I experienced it in my games. However, everything we should say about this map should be taken with an asterisk, because Jale Veliki, the author of the map, is even right now currently making updates to the map. And one of the things he will address is the Merc camp and the large distances. So his plan is to move the main bases and the red camps slightly more inwards in order to decrease distances, and also to change several creeps, because I believe, if I understand correctly, there was the issue that orcs did not so much like the fact that there was no easily accessible level 2 permanent, so claw item, claws +5 or so. So
And the
yeah,
Shadow Priest.
oh yeah, that too. Yes.
And this is Reforged graphics right now. What the hell?
Yeah.
Can I turn this off or?
Yeah, you get to File and then Preference, and you can put it on SD and not HD.
Second from bottom.
At the bottom, yeah. HD, yeah, there you go.
SD.
Yeah,
How
you need to
dare
restore.
they?
Okay. And so about the map in general, I think the option of having 2 accessible expansions in different locations is something that's not really present on any other map, except maybe Twisted Meadows. So the map has a few unique features going, but so just from my personal experience, I think the map has potential, but it's somewhat difficult for me as a player also to get a grasp on the pathing. So maybe this is something where actually the tile set is a downside, because of some maybe some just the visual parts of a tile set maybe can make it easier to understand where in the map you are. So for example, in Twisted Meadows, there's the shallow water in the center, which clearly indicates if you see shallow water, you're in the center. If you're not, you're somewhere else. So you easily know where you are, even without looking on the minimap. And unfortunately, with this tile set, I feel like this visual support is not as strong, because the shallow water really doesn't look too different from the other parts. On the other side, there are obelisks. Maybe if we play this map 20 times, it will be automatic that we know where we are. But I think this map really suffers more than other maps from having I'd say, taking longer to learn. And unfortunately, new maps sometimes just don't get a chance.
Yeah. Do you know why when I zoom out a bunch, it gets like all black here?
Yeah, you need to press CTLR and mouse wheel inwards.
CTLR what?
Mouse wheel inward.
So just control
Scroll
and the
it.
mouse wheel, and then you can
Yeah.
adjust the shadow.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Why does it do it? What the fuck?
I don't know why it does.
So just one last thing, I think this map should be given chances, especially since Jale is working on updates. He's like every mapper, we were very willing to listen to feedback if we get it. So maybe the current version has some flaws, but I'm confident it can be updated to be a viable competitive map.
Okay. Anyone else?
What are
I
the
can-
creeps at the Merc camp? Sorry, what are the creeps at the Merc camp really quick? I just want to see them.
It's a frost armor
Okay.
crab, and
It's a
the rest is
lobster
just normal
beast.
crabs.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's like it's almost like what's that 3-player map from back in the day? Nomad Isles. It's kind of similar to
Yes,
that, except
yes.
there's a big crab. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's all I wanted to ask. Go ahead.
For me, it was one of the best maps before the contest from last year. So I was very vocal about this map should be added. But I still did give Jalif some feedback, and I still don't like some stuff around the map. I think the itemization is not how we are used to in a competitive play, like most of the maps. I think the itemization could be better with how the creep spots are designed. I also don't like the red spots; they are too far in a corner. And yeah, I think the tie set is okay. For me, I think every tie set works if it's not like too red or too dark. Like, of course, Outland fully won't work in my opinion, but stuff like this is totally fine when you can make the creeps work. I think the problem of this map right now is that the matchup is too much, or each matchup has too much of a favorite. So in pretty much every matchup, one wants to veto the map, and the other one wants to play it. And that's, in my opinion, why it doesn't work at the moment. I would always veto it. I think the only playable matchup is maybe Undead versus Human, because it's maybe the map that works there.
Okay. Remo, are we moving on?
I think so. Yeah.
What's
Last
next?
Refuge is our next one. I think that's the one we should all be pretty familiar with. Was added into ESL back in 2011, I think, something like that. Maybe 2009, I'm not sure. It was added into ESL at some point in collaboration between Omgan and ESL. This map was made, and I thought for a long time this was by far the best map we ever had. The first map that I thought was very balanced for many races, playable in pretty much every matchup. I think it's actually playable in every matchup. I think it does a lot of things very right. A lot of camps to be contested in the middle, a lot of item diversity, although too many circlets drop, in my opinion. Safe green camps, sometimes hard level 2 creeps for some races, especially a problem for human oftentimes against orc. But the expansion is doable, easy to creep, but it's close to the opponents. It can also be pushed. So I think that's good design. There's 3 gold mines per player total, so 6 gold mines total. So there's transitions available for the late game. The natural doesn't last too long, so you're going to be under pressure to do something if you fast expanded fairly quickly. And I think this map has by far the best Mercamp implementation out of all the maps in the pool, including the new ones. It is a close by Mercamp that you can do if you want, or if you have to. If you have to have Merc support, you can do it, but you better be sure it's going to work out because you also get punished really hard. For example, if a human knows he's going to be facing a Crypt Lord player, he can do the Merc camp and get those Mercs he desperately needs. But if he doesn't respect the fact that he might be going up against DK Harass, it can also hurt very bad because this is a pretty hard camp to do. All in all, really good map. Only problem that I see is that it's narrow almost everywhere. It would be kind of cool if there were some larger areas. But yeah, I think this was the first really well-designed map and still holds up to
Yeah,
this day.
the creep aggro is, I think, everybody's
Yeah,
biggest
true.
grip around the area with the mercenary camp and the expo. Carson, go ahead.
Yeah, that is for sure the biggest issue. Another issue with it, and this may just be an actual issue with the drop table itself, but of course that big priest that most players creep very often, night elves, orcs, I don't know if humans always creep it right away, but undeads creep it as well. And then you have the opportunity to get illusions. What can you do with illusions? You can pull the Merc camp onto your opponent. You can pull the Murloc camp. You can pull the Priest camp. You can pull the Expo, and it becomes total chaos. Especially Todd, I'm sure you know as a human player, when an undead comes and pulls 4 creep camps onto you, expanding, it's pretty brutal. So I think, yeah, those 2 green camps and the Merc camp. I think Merc camp, Remo pointed out, it's a good Merc camp, but maybe it could be further back so that you can't do this pull abuse, or maybe, the illusions not be there on that drop table or something, because that is just really, really wacky. But other than that, yeah, it's definitely before Northern Isles, it was sort of that map that everyone went to. If you had a best of 3, you played it in pretty much every matchup. I like that it has that third base on the high ground with the red camp, similar to what Secret Valley had. That was probably the best aspect of Secret Valley, that third base that was high ground and a red camp. So it's safer when you get it, but more difficult to actually get initially. And it makes the later games interesting. There's lots of creeps. There's those turtle camps in the corners that you can take later on, so it doesn't get stale. You always have things to do at every point in the game. In the mid game, you can contest for the shops, but the shops are difficult to creep, and they have trappers and bloodlust, so it's not the easiest to take, but you do have something to fight over in the mid game, and you also have something to fight over in the late game. I think it's a great map with a couple of flaws, but maybe easily fixable. I'm not sure if they've attempted to be fixed. They of course fixed that farm bug on the labs where you could get the farm vision on that little bump under the ramp, and you could use the labs. They fixed that, so maybe they could fix that creep aggro issue with the illusions and stuff like that. Other than that, one of the best maps for sure.
Mafe? You muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I think the map is also really good. It's one of the best maps, yes. It has some weird pathing, but it's also to me the outstanding feature of the map, so I don't mind it. I believe, unlike Echo Isles or Amazonia, this map only gets better the longer the game lasts, because there's just a lot of stuff to do. The high ground expansion, you can always have basically two mines active at the same time, and I'd say even due to the pathing, it's always possible to attack your opponent in a spot where you where he might not be able to react in time. So there's really, I believe, a lot of dynamic gameplay going on even later on.
Tenchi?
Yeah, I also think it's one of the best maps. But I really think it's one of the maps that should be fixed with the small stuff. Like what you said, the Merc camps, it's really no big deal to push it a little bit more inward so you don't get slowed by the Mud Golem, or just put the Mud Golem a little more behind. Also, what I don't like is the 2 green spots, the Murloc and the Troll one. Sometimes they pull each other. Because if you go too far, like in between on the tree side of them, you attack the creep and the Murlocs will pull, which I absolutely don't think it should be possible so easy that creeps get so chaotic. Yeah.
Well, what's the best way to fix that? Since you know all the map making stuff, like
It should be
would you
pretty
fix it?
easy to just push it a little bit to the side. Like
How
the
do you
creeps,
mean exactly?
Well, you take the bottom Merc spot and you push it just a little bit more to the bottom. You can just remove two trees, and still, if you have the same the same entrance, it doesn't really make a difference how you approach the creeps. Yeah.
So you will move the mercenary camp down, but what about the Murloc camp and the Trapper camp? You move them a little bit more towards the water?
Yes. And the Merc camps you put, you can, and not the Merc camp, the Murlocs, you can put them more to the water. You can also push them a bit down, and the Trolls
Is there
a
no
bit
way
up.
to just reduce the aggro vision of the creeps? No way.
No.
And like,
You'd
so
only have.
what would it take for that to happen, for the Last Refuge to be changed? It has to go through Blizzard, so we would need someone from Blizzard to actually do something about that, or?
No, just the mappers can do it easily, but the problem is that most of the maps did go through Blizzard, which I don't know is a possibility anymore, because we do pretty much everything ourselves now with War 3 champions. I think the mappers should do it, but you really need to let the tournaments know that we did this, and you should ask them if they are fine with it. And you need to split the map.
So if W3 Champions and DreamHack, for example, said, okay, like these maps have some problems, we want to get those fixed, and they contacted map makers, you think it would be very easy for map makers to do those edits and then have those maps actually be part of W3 Champions? And
it's really not a big deal.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Really fast done. I also think the behind the lab and the first creep spot, it could be just a tiny bit more space. Just maybe one tile, like one tree size. Just a little bit.
Yeah. Remo, how would you like that to happen?
What do you mean?
Like changing the maps changing the maps in the rotation, maybe swapping 2 out and 2 in, and also fix the maps like Last Refuge, which are great, but do need some edits. How likely do you think it is that could happen from W2 Champions and DreamHack, for example?
I think for the European scene, it's pretty easy. Although DreamHack and ESL may have some obligation contractually to stick with official Blizzard maps, which then legally makes things a little bit more difficult. But I think something we have to keep in mind is also that this is a global community. So if this is done, it has to be consensual from all regions, meaning NetEase would have to be on board. And that's where it gets more difficult.
Yes.
Because if we start playing different versions of Last Refuge and Echo Isles and Northern Isles in the West and in the East, that's when things get really weird.
Yeah. It's actually weird, like already kind of where we're at, because for such a long time, NetEase was like the gold standard, like all the best players are playing there, and then like we need to be the ones like to copy them, so to speak. And then now that there is W3 Champions, a lot of them are the ones playing on W3 Champions, and W3 Champions is innovating much more than NetEase. Of course, NetEase, they were the first one to have like the big zoom and all those features, rebinding the hotkeys. But now, W3 Champions already has pretty much everything that NetEase has, and they're already innovating so much more with like host bots and stuff. So I actually wonder if W3 Champions will start doing this kind of stuff. If NetEase, they would be like, it'd be almost embarrassing for them because they're not making much more happen these days. They'd be the one having to follow. So definitely worth to talk about. I guess, Carson, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because NetEase, they started off with a lot of innovations, but then they've had some problems. Like, for instance, I don't know what this is, but there's a bug where you get Terenas Stand like all the time on NetEase. Like, if you look at everyone's map ratios, what they've gotten, it's like 50% TS. And they haven't fixed that, and it's been like at least a year since that happened. Maybe even longer, maybe even since the map was like updated. I don't even know if NetEase has been around that long, but it's been for a while that you've gotten TS, and that's like a huge problem for the ladder in general, and they haven't fixed it. So they seem to have like an influx of stuff they did initially, and then they seem to maybe slump a bit, and they had that map Dalaran, which wasn't, the greatest, but because of the Merc camps, but we'll probably get into that later with another map that's in this list. But in terms of implementing new maps, I think we should just go ahead and do it and hope that the TOs, sort of are inclined to go along with us as well, unless there's contract stuff. But I think it would be good to just get them fixed and at least get them out there and get the word out there, because nothing will happen unless we actually just take the first step and just try to get them started at minimum.
Really hard to get the ball running.
Yeah. Okay, Remo.
All right, let's go. Next one, Northern Isles. That is the easiest one. We can clean that up in 2 minutes.
Oh, yes.
This map's amazing. The best map that's ever been made. And I'm not sure if I can even point out anything bad. When it first came into the pool, there were a few issues. Like the natural gold mine could be pulled with a golem that was super abusable. And especially the lab was really dumb. There was a lot of nulls there, and there were poison everywhere, and those would trigger so often when you ran past. But shout out to Kato, who quickly adjusted those flaws and made this into a very amazing map, the best map that there ever has been. I actually talked about this map before when we were comparing it to other maps. Despite how big it is, the one shop can certainly be problematic, but it is an interesting feature here because there is reason for you to be in the middle. Marketplace, creeping, and the shop, of course. And I think the most amazing feat about Northern Isles is, despite how big it is and how many creep options there are, and by that strategy and late game options, it is always possible to contest your opponent. Outside of the green claws camp, actually every camp on the map is contestable. For the Tuskars, it's pretty hard, and maybe for the red camp in the late game, if you're not in the right position, it's pretty hard. But every other map is definitely contestable on this here map, despite how many creeps there are, despite how big the map is. And so I think from playstyle dynamics viewpoint, it's amazing. It's the best map ever.
Carson,
Incredible.
why do you
incredible.
disagree with Remo?
Well, maybe I'll try to add a couple points, although it is the greatest map ever in 1v1 terms. Something about these snow maps I love, like Avalanche, even though a lot of people hate Avalanche in terms of 2v2, I love that map. I love that map, and I love snow maps for some reason. I even like Melting Valley just watching it, even though that map very bad too. But Northern Isles, I like that the lab is difficult to creep. It's actually one of the harder orange camps. Even like it might even take longer to creep than some of the, at times the middle camps. One flaw would be the Spidey boys next to the two expos. They web your Zeppelin sometimes. They, they'll just web it as it's running by. So,
But it's unchangeable, sadly,
yeah,
without dropping the creep.
Right. Yeah, and I like that there's some unique creeps. Like the labs are completely unique. The red camps are completely unique. At least the big creeps there, and the Spidey boys are unique as well. So I like that there's some new creeps and that they actually work. But I'd say that's the one flaw. Everyone's seen that clip from Insup, him getting his Zeppelin webbed and losing his hero, I think he did, to it, which is a little bit of a problem, but I don't know how it could be fixed. And I don't know if it's that big of a problem, actually. And there's, again, there's camps to contest in the middle, similar to Last Refuge, which I think is very important. And both from a player having goals in the game and from a spectator being able to, or a commentator being able to say, this is their goals sort of in the mid game, and having something to point at when, he's ahead because he got the shop and there's only one shop. He got the heal scroll. It's very clear who's ahead, and it's very clear what the players are trying to do. And I think I like that transparency in a map.
Guys, who wants to go next?
Well, I don't have much to add. It's really the greatest map ever made, I think. And yeah, I'd like to point out that it's not a lot on Summer's standard green map, and it's still good.
Tenchi?
Same. I think for many mappers, this is the golden standard of mapping. It's pretty much the best map in the pool. But despite being the best map in pool, I didn't see the older versions with the Drake. I don't know about these ones. But even when it was updated and fixed, many players didn't play it. It was a long time vetoed, like new maps are.
Yeah. I think I like it, but it's not my favorite map personally. Like maybe to watch, but to play, I know that against Sundead is like super hard, I think, to play on this map. So yeah, balance-wise, I don't know if it's like super high up there. Then again, it's like mostly the one matchup, against Orc, for example. I don't mind it. Mirror obviously is fine. Against Elf, I would say mostly fine as well, even though it's not the easiest map either. But yeah, against Sundead, it can feel very difficult sometimes. Okay, let's move on then.
Yes. Where we going? Twisted Meadows. Like Echo Isle is a map that has been in the pool for a really long time. Underwent some changes a while ago, but mostly it's been looking like this for a long time. Gets vetoed a lot because it has a lot of issues with some matchups. It's the number one vetoed map in the pool. Whenever it's in the pool, WGL recently removed it, but it's extremely unique. 4-player map, tons of creeps, even islands, macro map, obviously, big macro map, but ironically, in the beginning, super hard to creep. All the camps you can do early are usually in the middle, unless you go for the lab, but that seems pretty risky. And then there's these weird green camp maps, green camp creep spots that don't do much. So I know that a lot of mappers are very critical of this map, and I get it. It's weirdly made. It doesn't adhere to a lot of the standards that we feel a good map has to have. There's randomness in spawns, you to the opponent. There's randomness in spawns, you towards the merc camp or the merchant. There's so much RNG in items. We like calling it. Casino Warcraft. There's weird rock golem pulls you can do. There's islands you can abuse. It's a really, really weird map, but I still will always make the case that this map should stay in the pool as long as we don't have a good macro replacement. And I think we don't have a macro replacement. This is the one macro map we have in the pool. So earlier I talked about that I would prefer to see rather people focusing their energy on making new maps rather than fixing old ones. This is the one exception to that statement. I think this map is so unique and we don't have anything like it that we should make some slight tweaks to this map to make it a lot better. And I think, in my opinion, those are pretty simple. First, force cross spawn so that players can be more reliably going for a build that they know is going to work. It's the worst feeling ever, whether you're human or night elf or whatever, and you're trying to go for a certain creep route and you're not scouting because you have to save resources, and you're starting your camp and suddenly close position, boom, early game over. That's horrible. I think it should be cross position spawn where there's still some randomness then. You can still spawn close to the merc or close to the merchant, which is still quite a bit of RNG, but it's a lot less extreme. You know where your opponent is going to spawn or where he is spawning, and you know what you can get away with reliably. Number one, first important thing I think is force cross spawn. And secondly is make the green camp even better. It was buffed a little bit. I think they added one level 1 creep. I don't think that's enough. I think right now it's 113 creeps. I think it should be like 133 creeps so that you only need 2 green camps for level 2 and also make it drop Slipper's item, so a very small item. I think with those 2 changes, the map would be a lot more predictable in terms of game plan and would be a lot less frustrating with its complete randomness and could once again be a little more reliable for top players.
I want to see you play a couple games against Moon and then hear your opinion of that map after. That would be pretty funny. Carson, Remo was just saying while you dropped that he thinks that this is like the big macro map, and unless we get another big macro map to add into the map pool, or maybe we should wait until that happens to replace Twisted Meadows. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, well, I heard Remo say about that green camp patch, and they of course changed the dragons, and that was more for that abusable thing. We were talking about tricks that can be abused that are good and tricks that can be abused that are bad. That dragon thing was pretty awful. But the green camp, yeah, like they can't just put one creep in the green camp and be like, oh, we fixed it. Human can get out of their base now. Undead can get out of their base against Orc without a Crypt Lord sort of thing. Like it still has very much the same problems that it had before. And I think it is the sort of you can't get map control early, and then once the mid game hits, once you have 40 plus supply, then it's just you creep the entire map, which is a cool dynamic, a macro map. But the early games, you can too easily get a huge advantage in the early game by just bullying your opponent a lot of the time. So I think it needs something that's easier to creep early on. I'd say is the biggest problem currently. But yeah. Big map needs to be in the pool.
How about cross map only that Remo suggested?
Oh, 100% agree with that. That 100%. Yeah. Another problem has always been, especially like human mirror. One player gets a merc camp, the other doesn't, or like night elf mirror matchups in particular.
Yeah, like me against Sky, WCG.
Exactly. It's brutal. Like you can't creep the shop. You're gonna lose 6 militia.
Dude, I got so many bad memories on this map between this against Sky, then Moon making my own heroes. Like what the fuck, and taking like 7 expo.
But XP tomes against Orc back in the day, free level 3, kill all their burrows at like 4 minutes. That's a pretty good memory, I'm sure.
Yeah, one of the few.
Yeah, that's all I got though.
Tenchi?
Worst map in the pool. I hate it. I think it's almost unplayable as human. You have to veto it. I also think it is not the oldest map, but it plays like the oldest. It's like Reign of Chaos, creeps just too hard everywhere. You kind of have to go for a cheesy merc and not merc camp. Yeah, maybe merc camp or lab, or yeah, you go Harris, which not all races like. Cross position maybe worth doing, but I'm not sure about the lab creep then for human. But I think maybe it will work out because it's already pretty bad for human. I'm also not a fan of Iceland. I think that's just lame. I would absolutely remove them.
Remove what, you said?
The islands.
Oh.
I think they,
You don't
are
think we
just
should have
lame.
one map in the pool that has this thing?
No, I think islands are just clunky. You need the Zeppelin there. It can, it's just clunky. I don't like it really, and can get really lame.
What if there's only creeps there and no gold mine? Would that be better or worse?
I think that would be better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or maybe a gold mine, but with lower gold or something.
Maybe like gold mineral space where you get 20 per sec.
Yeah, right. And then you just pick up a nuke as an item if you clear it. Mafe?
Well, I'm kind of ashamed to admit that I somewhat like Twisted Meadows because of all of its uniqueness. But the problem is we have one map out of 7 or 8 in the pool, which has all of this combined. Instead, it might be better to have like these unique features spread out over 3 or 4 maps, like one big map, one map with weird creep roads, maybe one map with one island instead of one map with 4, and all of them different maps. So ultimately, I'd like to see it be replaced, but we should replace it, in my opinion, with a map that is also unique in some way and not with another clone of Amazonia or Equals.
Okay. Yeah, many good points. I don't know if making this map cross-map and doing a few edits will be enough to make people more enthusiastic about it. On one hand, it's very easy to hate on it because it's Casino Warcraft and there's so many like insane items or really bad items that you can get, but at the same time, it has to provided, much like Echo Isle, some epic games in the past. And it's like definitely a staple of the game, but I don't think I would mind too much if it got replaced by like a solid good map personally. So it's definitely up there in terms of maps that I'd like to see replaced with Echo Isle. What's next, Remo?
Shallow Grave.
So that's the map editor or the overview?
The preview first. I don't think we can, or at least I can't speak to the details of this one too much. I included because of Tenchi's recommendation, but I did remember seeing it at some point. So if we have the overview open, we can see it is one of the smaller maps of the new ones. In the mapping community over the last few years, I think it's been pretty clear that the trend has been clearly going towards larger maps. And by larger maps, I mean bigger than AZ and Echo. Because when we talk about map pool, current competitive map pool, there's only 2 small maps. That's Echo and AZ. And there's a few medium ones, and there's some really big ones, like maybe Terenas, and of course, obviously Twisted. This is one of the few small maps in comparison to many of the others. There's a ton of contestable camps in the middle, but I'm not very, very familiar with this map. I don't think I rated it back in the day when I was doing the judging. I think the mappers might be most familiar with this. So, Mafe and Tenchi, tell us.
Yeah, I reviewed the map in the contest. There were some slight problems, like some bugs which really hold the map a little bit back. And also on the high ground there was a Frost Nova creep, which is too strong in my opinion. But all in all, I think the layout is well done. The tile set is well done. The creeps are now very well done. And I think it looks like a very neutral map that can work out for everyone, and it looks like a competitive map with no gimmicks, no, just straight up 1v1 who's better.
Yeah, so for those people who played the campaign, I believe this map looks very similar to the Blood Elf campaign, the first 2 levels. Anyway, I think the map is sort of also rather generic without too many unique features. There are some, like the labs, which are on the high ground, which maybe is not really not so obvious from the screenshot. So I think it would be some sort of a not very risky choice to add a new map. So which, depending on your point of view, can either be an upside of it or a downside. So that's about all there is to say. I think the map is very balanced. Obviously, with new maps, it's hard to tell how balanced they really are before they have undergone heavy testing by pro players at high level, which is would be ideal, but it's completely unrealistic in our current situation. So yeah, maybe it could deserve to be given a chance.
Is this map part of anything right now? Or?
No, it was just added last year in the contest, and just in the tavern brawl from Taker, he sometimes did use the map.
So for a map that's not part of anything right now like this, what do you think would be the best process to get it introduced? Is to add it to the Retreat Champions maybe first?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the Merc Camp is the one thing that stands out to me. That's always a big, point of contention for the early game. This looks like an easily creepable Merc Camp for Night Elf and Human. Is that in practice not the case?
I think it's hard enough that you can harass it, because it has inner fire, and the inner fire guy can also inner fire the level 6 troll. It's maybe not like hard like on LR, but I think it is harassable.
Am I missing something with the circlet to the left of the top spawn? Is there not one in the bottom spawn? You see that green camp?
Yes, there's one in the bottom spawn.
Am I missing it? I must be
Yeah,
missing it.
no,
That
it's
was
just
just
maybe a
forgotten
mistake.
to be added.
Oh, okay, good. I was like, what the hell's going on? Yeah, I think it looks pretty cool. Merc Camp, always an issue, but I think what's interesting about this map is just looking at it now, I think there's lots of interesting ideas for creep routes, potentially, because there's lots of, it looks like creepable camps early on, and also a couple of options for bigger camps, which I think is a cool thing for innovation and creep routes to make the early game more interesting, and then there's always going to be an interesting late game if there's more than one expansion available.
Yes.
So I think it could be cool. Be interested to see it played.
Yeah, and again, it's valuable to be in the middle because of, the lab, not so much necessarily, but just because there's creep camps, and you can pretty much get everywhere from the middle pretty quick, with the exception of the red camps, but that's a late game thing anyways.
I see no point why it shouldn't be added at some point. So it looks very safe.
I want to
this
see
one
this
to
map
the
in the world
ladder pool.
editor. I'll open it. Yeah, because the overview doesn't show exactly how it is, especially by the lab. I was intrigued. Okay, so this is on high grounds. It looks
Oh, it's
pretty
like
damn
that
hard
other
to do.
map.
Oh
What
my
was
god.
that other map that had High Ground Golem Lab that was in the map pool for a while?
Shattered Temple?
Murgle
No,
something?
wait.
Yeah, it was the one with the turtle in the
Swamp
top.
Temple?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Swamp
Swamp
Temple.
Temple.
had
Yeah,
that,
Swamp
yeah.
Temple.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this high ground creep, it's more like the nearly a red camp.
Yes.
So you start in top left and bottom right. And then, so, wait, like this is the natural expand, and I guess, so this would be the one that they take later on. Yeah, this one looks alright. I hope it gets added to the Retreat Champions. I would try to play on it.
Yeah, I think also visually it's pretty cool. Like it has this unique style of like a beach side. There's like the little sand around, and it has this this interwebbed area with the grass, and then there's some stony, ruinous path. So it's pretty unique visually. And there's chopped down trees in the middle, which isn't for gameplay so relevant, but it provides you with a little bit of a fantasy. It's pretty cool.
And there seems to be still enough space to put down aggressive shops and stuff like that, which is maybe a little bit of a problem with Northern Isles, that you can't really put buildings aggressively. Whereas this map, I think there's water in places, but there is in key spots you can still place buildings down.
You have a fantasy about chop down trees, Remo?
You know me too well, bro.
And are there any talks happening about maybe adding this map to the Retreat Champions, or?
No, not really. It's a bit unknown, and also it wasn't in the top 5 because it was held back by some heavy bugs.
Okay. And they have been fixed since, or not?
Yes, they have been fixed. It would be my top 2 map, of course. But
who made this?
Mirel.
Oh yeah, okay. All right, Remo, what's next?
Shattered Exile from our very own Maffei. A map that was supposed to start as a 2v2 map, I believe, but was also considered for some mapping contest for 1v1. And this is a 4-player map. that does enforce cross-map spawn. And as you can see, being a 4-player map, pretty big. Not as big as Twisted Meadows, but certainly large expansions. 2 or 3 expansion options per player, sort of. But also you would move towards the enemy bases in that scenario. But anyways, a map that, by the large design, by the mercamp possibility, next to the expansion, easy lab as well, lots of macro options. I'm not sure if it would hold up to be as straight up of a macro map as we would like to see, there being one in the pool. But out of all the maps that I've seen so far, I feel like this could be the best macro replacement map for Twisted Meadows that we currently have.
This looks perfectly symmetrical everywhere, is it?
I hope it is.
Mostly it is. Just the creep spots in the corners are different depending on where you spawn.
In the
Yeah.
middle, actually, next to the tavern, it's a slightly different, but it's mostly the same.
Yeah, so what Tenji just mentioned is you may wonder if you have a 4-player map for 1v1, why couldn't it be just a 2-player map? Well, depending on if the players spawn in the top right and bottom left or in the other starting positions, the remaining starting positions will have different creeps and different item drops. So everything else is the same, only in the very, very late game, the starting positions will have an influence at the spawning positions. So there are a few unusual creeps. There is a non-standard mercamp, so not Lord on Summer, but the one with the assassin, with the shadow priest, with the forest troll high priest, and with the slow kobold, and another one of these rogues. So it's not accessible early on. So the mercs will be available by the mid game, I suppose. It's obviously there is no guarantee that they will work, but I believe they could be made to work. So about the rest, well, there are a lot of gold mines and expansion is relatively easy. So it is indeed somewhat of a potential macro map. However, there aren't too many high-level creep spots in the middle. There is one contested yellow spot or orange spot and one contested green spot near this fountain area here. And in the long run, there are a lot of green spots, but the orange or medium spots, they are relatively rare and therefore valuable and should lead to contests about them. So, and one thing about the visuals, you may realize if you go back to the overview that the 4 quarters of the map are visually distinct it's not something that I originally came up with. It's something that's also been present on LR, where the top half or maybe the top quarter of the map is like autumn and the bottom is summer. But it's also something that I have to say I'm quite proud of. So, yeah.
All right. Who wants to chime in? Tenshi.
I think it's a really good map. It was my second place, and it only got better after some different creeps. I don't think it's a replacement for Twisted Meadows. I don't think it will lead to macro that often, but more than other maps in the map pool currently.
Yeah.
And despite being a macro map, the distance from base to base are not that long. I think it's like Northern Heights or maybe even a bit closer.
Here it should be a little bit smaller.
Yes.
Remo, I noticed there's some toads in the center of the map. Maybe another fantasy of yours, or?
Bro. Is there? Yeah, there is. Yeah. You know, it always freaks me out how they just have like little blobs instead of having a face. But I take all the corpses and all the critters I can get, bro. I'm on board.
Looks like Carson is having some computer issues. Yeah, actually, this maps look interesting. Like, this is the type of map, the last one and this one, that I wouldn't mind if we saw added into W2 Champions map pool and then either adds like a lot of maps, have like a giant map pool, or even get rid of some of the old ones that a lot of people agree are not that great.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Todd, that is the perfect segue. I think we're ready to move on to some of the remaining old classics. Turtle Rock.
Oh god.
This one was reintroduced to War 3 Champions. This one was reintroduced to WGL. And I've been told from War 3 Champions guys that was mainly reintroduced to the War 3 Champions pool because of WGL. And I think WGL made a big mistake introducing this map back into the pool. This map is quite unique, true, but it's just such a balance nightmare. Just the fact that there is watch awards on this map, on any map, is ridiculous. There should never be endless vision without any counterplay ever, especially when you consider that it is by far the easiest to do for 1 out of the 30 heroes in the game, aka Blade Master. And also there are so many great Blade Master camps on the map, great creep camps for Orc to take, with the turtles being medium armor and so on. Human can struggle hard on this map, where they can only creep the little circlet camp with their militia and then can't really get much done, seemingly. Night Elves as well. Unless you're playing Keeper, you are really boned with Ancient of War creeping on that map. If you're playing Keeper, it's fine. Then you can kind of creep anywhere. But you can't always play Keeper. You don't always want to play Keeper. It's kind of cool in the fact that there's expansion in the middle, expansions on the outskirts, talking about gold mines here. But it's also really weird. If you ever manage to get 2 of the sentry wards, which as Orc isn't that rare, isn't that hard, the opponent is going to be super limited. It feels extremely unfair. There's cheesy Ogre Lord pulls you can do here, kind of like on Concealed Hill, although here perhaps a little bit harder to pull off. And guess what? You know who it's easiest with again? Orc. You can pull them out, use Hex, use Ensnare. This is a really, really Orc favored map, extremely Orc favored map. After that comes Undead. And for Night Elf and Human, this map is pretty horrible. And there's also
For
no
Human.
lab, which Human and Night Elf, it's horrible. There's no lab, which can oftentimes be a big problem. Also, the trees are a nightmare. On some bases, it feels like you only have 6 trees and then you're gone, and then you have no wood to chop from anymore. So, despite all of its uniqueness, which can be cool, I think this is the map I really dislike. Not as much as Echo Isles, but I really hope they remove it again from WGL, and I think we should remove this from War 3 Champions as well.
I'm gonna be brief. This map is complete garbage. Get it the fuck out of any one-on-one tournament there is. I don't mind it in 2-on-2, but in 1-on-1, I hate it. Carson, welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, this map, 2v2, cool. And I think it's a classic map. It's a map that people enjoy, similar to Twisted Meadows and 2v2. I think it's great. And, we shouldn't just ignore that 2v2 is a thing. There are good maps for 2v2, and they're not always good maps for 1v1. And I think they should be kept in the 2v2 pool, of course. But yeah, the expos are hard. There's watcher wards, and it's a big map where you normally want to do some hit and runny stuff. But then there's a watcher ward. So, it's like you have the best item in the entire game, and it's for the entire game. Couple of interesting things. The red camps have those heal wards or whatever they're called. There's a lot of cool creeping early game, but yeah, it's not the best, very imbalanced. And I think that's its biggest issue is the balance for sure. So yeah, get it out.
Mafe?
Yeah, when I saw that WGL reintroduced this map, I've felt like I've been personally insulted as a map maker. So there's really not much else to say. I think the most ridiculous thing about the argument was they brought it back because Twisted Meadows was vetoed too often, but then I checked the stats because I was that annoyed, and it turns out that when both Turtle Rock and Twisted Meadows were in the pool, Turtle Rock was vetoed even more often than Twisted Meadows. So I felt it was mind-boggling. But okay, maybe this was at a time when Autumn Leaves was still very new. I'm not exactly sure about the timing, but I just agree. I hope the map will be gone again sooner than later.
Yeah. By the way, guys, Tenchi was not feeling well, so he had to go. We wish him well. Thanks to him for joining us. And yeah, we'll continue without him for the rest of the maps. They're falling like flies, guys. First, the 2 pros don't show up. Tenchi not there. Carson dropping every 5 minutes. Like for a second here, we were just 3. What is this? An episode of Survivor or something? Who's getting eliminated next? Me?
I'll always be back, though. I'll always be back. You can count on me. Okay.
Thank you. All right, what's next?
All right, we move on to one of the new maps. Too bad Tenchi isn't here because he judged this map and knows very well about Tortoise Haven.
Oh, I love this one. I love it.
The winner of last year's mapping contest, so that was like, I don't know, 5 months ago or something. And this map has uniquely, like Echo Isles, axis symmetry between the red camps, the merchant, the tavern, and the marketplace. The axis lies with around which the symmetry is done. And you can see that pretty quickly. The spawning positions are kind of in the middle of that symmetrical line. And then there's 2 expansion options, one to the south, one to the north. The northern one is way easier to do. The southern one is kind of doable, but almost suicidal. I think the southern one is the same as Turtle Rock Natural, so in the middle. So very difficult. Lots of creep options, and unlike Echo Isles, and I came around to this fact, I was at the beginning not the biggest fan, but I'm appreciating this map more and more. A lot of unique camps to be contested along the axis of symmetry. Remember when you talked about Echo Isles, and we all hate Echo Isles, right, guys? Right, guys? That's right.
Yeah.
There's only
Damn
2
right.
contestable camps. Here, there is 5 camps, and 2 of those are really big red camps. So there's clear contention going on for these camps. It has a unique look as well. It's not the usual Lordaeron summer look. It has like the sunken ruins stuff.
Wait, this is a
when you
red camp?
Yeah, these are what's it called? Murgul, whatever guy is level 7. So, and the other guys are 3 and 4, so they are over level 20. And if the total number of creeps or the level of the creeps is 20 or higher, it will be marked as a red camp.
Okay. And this is a red camp. Sorry, Remo, continue.
Yeah.
I was just surprised that these shitty
So it's
looking
very-
Murlocs were red. Go ahead.
It's a very unique map. It is already a much better version of Echo Isles. It's cool, it's interesting, it's unique. I think it deserves its chance. I am a little bit worried about some aspects. So there's only one shop on the map, which is perhaps the biggest problem. We have the case at the moment. On Echo Isles, it's not that big of a problem. It's a tiny map, and normally you can get to the shop. On Northern Isles, we have it as well, but it's a big map, but you're always kind of in the center. It's always easy to get to the center. Here, especially with how the shop is designed, it feels like it can be very difficult to get to. Say you're, for example, in the south, creeping the gold mine there, or creeping the red camp there, but mostly creeping the gold mine there with the turtles. And then let's say you want to get to the shop to get the item. That seems extremely difficult to do, especially should you lose map control after a TP or something. Very, very hard to get to these items if you need them. This also favors some races. Races with easy movement speed bonuses like Orc or Undead, or with Invis heroes like Blademaster Orc, can easily circumvent these issues, whereas if you lose your TP as human and you want to go there with your AM, but you can't buy a TP and it's nighttime and you have to run through the dangerous woods, hoping not to get messed with on your way to the merchant, that can be a problem potentially, but that is a risk I'm willing to accept. The map seems really cool and very unique, and we haven't had a map like this in a long time.
Yeah, I think it's so nice to look at. Like I was reviewing this map and I was like, I just feel comfortable. Like I just want to play the game actually, and that's so rare for me. But I just want to actually play the game when I see this map. It's cool. I don't know what it is, but it reminds me of like, although a terrible map, Road to Strathholm, I get the same sort of comforting feeling from. I don't know why, but it's not even the same tile set. But I just like it. I like it and I want to try it. I don't know how it's going to be balance wise, but it looks relatively balanced. And I like how it's, the axis symmetry like we're talking about. I think it's good. Maybe some of the creeps are a little bit difficult, but that obviously that bottom Murloc might be a little bit easy, but those Turtle Rock expansion camps are hard, but I guess that's supposed to be the more difficult late game expansion. Is that supposed to be the natural, or is there another creep camp that's the natural?
The other one is the natural.
Oh, okay, so that's totally perfect then. I like it. Check mark.
I think it's the tile sets and like the fact like, it feels like we're like in Pirates of the Caribbean or something, like there's some water, there's some palm trees, like Get out the sunscreen, boys. Like I don't know. It looks like it's gonna be a good day on this map.
The
I
trees
like
are
it.
sometimes
don't know.
hard to click on, but that's the only issue with this tile set for me sometimes.
Yeah, but it's like.
Do we have the right beach body at the moment,
Oh.
though?
I'll be there alone, okay? Like it doesn't matter. Nobody's seeing me. I'm not gonna do one of those RL streams, so we're good.
They even did the right trees at the spawns. Okay, in the middle
Yeah.
there were different trees, but okay, good, perfect, awesome.
All right. So first of all, with Tenchi has occasionally mentioned these mapping contests. So we, by me, I mean the mini-mappers of Warcraft 3, we hold like 1 or 2 mapping contests per year, usually hosted by the Hive Workshop. And often there's a corresponding cup after the contest, and this map was the winner of last year's contest, so it's in some way officially the best map made in 2020, as reviewed by fellow mappers. So yeah, what is there to say about the map? So Kaya, I believe he created this map as a sort of attempt to fix or improve the concept of Echo Isles. So for example, if you would in your mind rotate the map by 45 degrees, or no, by some degrees, so that like the starting positions and the naturals are located as in Echo Isles, you would see that it's in some way similar. But there are additional parts like this second expansion and many red spots. So it's sort of similar, like it's sort of based on Echo Isle, but it's also clearly better, and also in some way different. So I personally like that on this map right from the start you have a lot of different creeping options as Night Elf and humans, of course. So there's like 4 creeps for creep camps, and you could make a case for all of them why in certain situation you would want to creep this camp, or in another situation you would want to creep this camp. This is really great and makes the map very interesting to play right from the start. And as Remo mentioned, there are a lot of contested camps which are also very valuable. They drop really good items. And in the late game, you can go to the second expansions, or you can go to the marketplace and spend your gold on some really strong items. Yeah. So about this map in particular, it has given a really good impression in the Hive Workshop Cup, which was casted by Back to Warcraft, if I remember correctly, in last October or November, and it's also been played in the Tavern Prawn hosted by Taker, and I particularly remember one really highly entertaining and crazy game, and it was an undead versus human, and it's basically fights going on all over the map at the same time. And unfortunately, I don't recall who exactly played it, but if you go to YouTube, I suppose you will certainly find what of it.
I think it was Blade versus TGW, if I remember right.
You know what's the interesting dynamic? It reminds me of Northern Isle in the way that if both players, I'm picturing like, human against elf, human against undead, for example. If I expand here, if I'm at the bottom and my opponent expands here, then it's just a lot of clashing after that. Before maybe finally it settles down and then people start creeping and then contest all those camps. Because it's like all those unique camps in the center. Other than that, it's symmetrical. But then in the center, it's like all those different camps that you have to fight for. So it's reminiscent of Northern Isle and Echo Isle in that, because on Northern Isle and Echo Isle, you've got these specific camps in the center you need to fight for, but here it's like many more of them and more varied for sure. I don't even know like which one you would favor. I guess like probably these two at first, but then you also got these two down there and then the big one up there. So yeah, it looks like a very interesting map. Again, like I'm looking at this now. There's a chance one day I play it and I'm like, I hate it, but I kind of want to try it and hope that it gets added to something, maybe to WT Champions.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have a Discord for minimappers, and it's. I believe we can post a link later on. Everyone can join, but it's supposed to be really focused on the process of making minimaps. So please no balance talks or other stuff. And because this is a semi-official Discord, I suppose I'm at liberty to mention that the Warcraft 3 Champions people also join in there, and we've given some suggestions about new maps also for the 2v2 map pool. And it's I would say it's very likely that this map will be the next one to be part of Warcraft 3 Champions.
Yeah, that's good. All right, Remo.
All right, then leaves us with one last map, and that is an old classic. The one we are still missing from the tournament map pool is Terenas Stand. Another map that has been with the scene for a very long time, and maybe has undergone the most out of all the changes. There were so many changes to this map over the years. Can't even keep up with them anymore. It is still part of the meta nowadays, but also gets vetoed a lot. Some people really dislike this map, and those are mostly undeads and maybe orcs, especially orc against human. It has one of the big balance problems, which is very easy level 2 at the beginning with a secured merc camp. This will always mean that human and night elf are favored. And for that reason, this is the map where we most of the time see it between those two races, human versus night elf. We see this map a ton with MK and Warden and all that stuff. It is naturally a defensive map. Both players have kind of like their own little island, which can only be crossed via 2 bridges. And on your island, everything is kind of safe. It's easy to creep there, it's easy to level there, get level 3, it's easy to expand there. And perhaps most importantly, you have your own merchant on your own little island, which normally you get all the items from, and the opponent can't. You only can steal them, but not too easily. There's also a lab, which is not too easy to creep, but if you secure it, you can get the shredder, and you can further play your macro game, which is normally the kind of games that this leads to. In the past, we would have said, well, expanding and macro play can only really be done by human and night elf, and orc and undead can't do it, so they're boned. That's not so much the case anymore. Nowadays, we see much more two-base play from all races, but the issue with the map, balance-wise, I think mostly lies with that merc camp. The fact that night elf and human can get it so easy, and how difficult that makes the late game, the mid game, and the early game for the other races. I like the map for its uniqueness. For its normally, I'm not a big fan of passive maps, but this is kind of its own unique map. We see a lot of different first heroes here. We see a lot of creative creep routes here. We see a lot of safe expansions here. This is also in its own right kind of a macro map. We don't go to 3 bases often, but sometimes we do. But we so often go to 2 bases. 2 bases on this map is almost a guarantee. This is why I think this is a cool map that we should keep in the map pool a little bit longer, but it does certainly have some balance issues.
Carson.
Yeah, this is one of the few maps that they reworked, and they really fixed a lot of the issues that we had previously. It's so much ingrained, this version, in my head. I barely even remember what the old version was like. I think even the expansion had like lightning shield or something crazy. I remember in the old version, people would expand to like the top corners sometimes. But that aside, I think it's really good. And an interesting point is that this has the most hero variety of any map. Orc can go Shadow Hunter. Very often, Orc against Night Elf, the Night Elf will go Demon Hunter. It's arguably the best Demon Hunter map, maybe next to Last Refuge. You'll see that very commonly. You see a lot of Warden, you see a lot of Mountain King first, more than any other maps, really. So you see a lot of variety, and of course, Crypt Lord common as well, but most maps it is common on in this meta. But you see a lot of hero variety, which is really cool, and it is like a macro map, but not like overdone. It's not massive. It can get a little bit boring in the mid game where you just sort of both trade your corners. You trade the the third base, the little renegade and the U trees and the lab. You just creep all that, and then you meet up and you fight eventually when the whole map is crept out. So a little bit boring maybe in the mid game, but still a good map with a lot of strategic variety. And I think it's good. I think the changes are good. I think the map is good. I like it.
Maffei?
Yeah. I think in the long run, maybe we can find a better map, but for now it's far from the biggest problem in the current map pool. And it also goes to show that, yes, if updates are made, maps can be improved. So I personally like it because of some of its unique features. It's, as you mentioned, it's sort of a macro map, but it's also one that is relatively low on resources if you consider creeps as resources, which, well, I think they are. So I'd keep it at the top shop. There's also the problem that creeps sometimes get aggroed if you are creeping the top right expansion. So if the reinforcing units are attacked by creeps, which could be fixed, but it's not as big of a problem as on LR. So I'm okay with the map, and yeah, maybe if we talk again in 3 years, we will see that, okay, now it's time to replace TS, and maybe even we get to this point earlier. I would be very happy about it.
Yeah. I kind of like Terenas Stand, not from necessarily like enjoyment point of view, even though I think it can be okay sometimes, but it's one of the few maps where like human can definitely kick into full gear and do pretty well. But I think it could use some improvements for sure, and especially around the items. Like that first item just plays such a big role. Like you see a lot of Warden, like Remo mentioned, like human against elf is the matchup where you see it a lot. Human mirror, it's guaranteed mount tanking first. If a player gets greater healing and the other guy gets invuln, if you got the invuln, you've lost the game already. Like I just don't see how you're gonna be able to win. Like it's just such a big difference with just the starting item with the greater mana. Even though it was lowered from 3 to 350 mana, it's still like such a big difference, and that's, in my opinion, still a pretty big problem. So I would love the items to be addressed, and I think the items affect the maps and vice versa a lot. So I hope that in the future, this map can be made better through maybe changing the items a little bit. As far as map design, other than that, I don't really see. I mean, maybe I find it a little bit annoying that a Warden with Blink level 1 can blink into my Expo. I feel like maybe it would be better if it was Blink level 2, because that would delay that, even though Blink level 1 is still kind of costly. But yeah, one of my preferred maps for sure. In the map pool. Okay, so I got... So you wanted to say something, Remo?
Yeah, I think we're through with the map, so we're kind of nearing the end of the show. But since you just touched on an interesting point, item drops. I mean, viewers of your stream will know that you feel items have a very big impact on the game, which objectively, of course, they do. This is something that has been brought up sometimes, but I feel like not enough. Map design, item drop design has a lot to do with this. And I think the most vocal player about that I've ever talked to is Hitman. Hitman has said a lot of times to me that it feels like item drops across the board should be lowered everywhere for there to be weaker items with less impact, to have less RNG impact. And I think this is something that also should go into the map making discussion. How much item power do we want to have from the creep camps? And how much do we want to limit that, if we want to limit it at all? I guess I'm going to kick off the obvious point. Well, we don't want them to be too good, otherwise they're going to be crazy strong. Say, for example, if from the first camp drops a Staff of Silence, bad idea, right? And you can extrapolate that down. Items which are too good shouldn't be in the pool. For example, Staff of Silence probably just straight up shouldn't be a part of the game, and Ring of Protection never should be a part of that drop table. But at the same time, there comes a point at which also you infringe on the epicness, I suppose. Let's say you creep a red camp, and if you're a hardcore, die-hard competitor like Hitman, maybe he would like to see from a red camp only a circlet and a tome. But if we go that far, that extreme in that direction, it also kind of takes away from the game when there's not any of these big drop items, these big impact items. So this is the question I pose to you guys. How should that philosophy look for us as map makers and the Warcraft community? How many good items do we want to have? How much epicness do we want to have? And how much do we want to tone it down?
I think like TM is probably too far to start. We could start there, and TM has too good of items. We could start at that baseline.
Yeah, the thing is, everybody, I think, pretty much agrees, except maybe not like super competitive players, that there has to be some RNG and randomness, and like that's fine as part of the game. Wait, what happened to Remo?
Oh no, it's happening to him now too. Oh no.
Did you misclick?
Remo, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, good.
Yeah, so most people would agree that there is RNG in the game, and that's fine, but I just find it's too extreme. Like I said, I just mentioned a very extreme scenario where two human players open mount tanking, they both creep the Mercamp the exact same. One of them finds a greater invuln and the other one finds greater mana. If you have the greater invuln, I'm sorry, but you've lost the game. Like, I just don't see how are you going to be able to do anything? You could play more defensive and stay at home, but then the opponent will creep the lab, get his shredder, and then just bully you and like destroy you completely. So it just feels too extreme. Like the bad items are too bad, the good items are too good. There needs to be some balancing done around that so that items don't decide such a big part. And even when you watch WGL, like honestly, it's absurd. The good items, like Infi is really good. He might be the best player in the world, but he's always getting claws. And then Happy, like I've cast and watched so many Happy games against X-Lord. What the hell is going on here? Like he's just getting like some insane items so much of the time. It's not even funny. Like, and obviously he's not. Maybe he would win without that. Maybe if he was 50-50 items, he'd win even more than now. Like who knows? But the thing is, they affect the game, in my opinion, way too much a lot of the time. And it would be more interesting if the RNG was definitely toned down a bit and reduced, and the items were like closer to being even. They don't have to be 100% even, but they need to be closer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of us would like to see that. Aura items especially are a big problem, and these early consumables like big mana, big problem. But I was trying to get more towards the point. Like, what if we, for example, every item drop in the game, every single camp, its item level gets reduced by 1. So, a Pennon of Energy becomes Claws. Claws becomes Slippers.
That's what
stuff
I was
like
going to
that.
suggest. Yeah, and then the red camps would be like Sobi masks and stuff, right?
Yeah. Would that be good or bad for the game?
Yeah, but then it's still the same ordeal. Like the difference between Greater Invuln and Greater Mana is still too big. Just because you lowered the tier, there are still bad and good items in every tier. Like the ring.
Yeah.
If you're human and your plan is to fast expand and you find a ring, you're going to find an item which for the first 10 minutes of the game is going to do 0 for you because nobody's going to click on the Archmage then. Even if they do, it's fucking garbage. It's going to die anyway. So like the ring compared to the claw is just night and day. So you just really don't want to have the ring at all. And it still applies if you lower those tier. Then, when I go to the next bigger camp, I'm still going to find that ring instead of a claw, and I'm going to be really sad.
But it's still less impact, right? Like, for example, if you creep the Merc camp on Terenas Stand nowadays, you get a big mana potion. If you did it with that patch of weakened item drops, then you would get Wand of Illusion, right? So the impact there would be a lot lower.
There's not enough tiers for the consumables, I think, too, because above the mana pot, then we're at Scroll of GG, and below it, then we're at Replenishment Potion. So there's sort of like not enough tiers, whereas for like the permanent items.
Yeah.
Mana Stone, okay, right, yeah, so there is a tier above, right? But still, going below that, there needs to be like almost another step down from the greater mana pot,
Yeah, so from a map maker perspective, that's definitely true. There is no level 1 consumable. We could, as a map maker, we could introduce some unconventional item drops. For example, there are some stuff which is really used like gold coins, which give 50 gold, which is essentially the same as you get an item and you immediately sell it.
Yeah.
Or there's or we could just say, okay, maybe we just, instead of a level 2 item like a Claw +5, we have like 4 tomes, which should even out more.
Oh.
But there's a lot of stuff possible, but this is so for existing maps, it's again the same issue. If the existing maps are used somewhere, they should be the same somewhere everywhere. So we can't really change that on our own initiative. That's something that should rather be decided by tournament organizers and players. And if they agree, then we as map makers can implement such a patch within a few days. That's my perspective. And
isn't there certain requirements like the melee thing, right? Is that only if you go through Blizzard, or then it doesn't matter if it's outside of that?
This is very technical. There's basically 2 ways you can make a melee map. You can make it very vanilla, like, so this is what all the ladder maps are like. And this is the only thing Blizzard will, as they have said publicly, they will only accept such maps for Blizzard ladder. So, but even within these limits, you can just change the item drops, and then you have the same, so changing the item drops is acceptable within this framework. And then you can manually change values of items or other stuff in the editor. This is something Blizzard will not accept, but it still could be made to work within something that would be considered a melee map. This is something like Tenchi and Remo have, I believe, worked together to change the item drop or the red spots of Autumn Leaves in the initial versions where they had this Crown of Kings, which normally would not belong to this tier of items.
I miss my crown.
But, yeah. So for new maps, we could potentially use weaker item drops compared to existing maps. This would be possible, yes, but this would also mean that these maps would stand out from other maps. And for example, I believe a Blade Master who is reliant on claws, if a Blade Master would creep a camp and basically had no chance of finding a claw at a green spot, it would probably make Blade Masters and Orcs maybe less viable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's instead of having 3 of 4 items that are viable at that camp, now you have the one. You have slippers that you kind of need to get. And that might be true with other heroes as well. But yeah, for Blade Master, for sure.
But I still maintain that one of the best ways to balance item is to increase the gold that they provide. And maybe some sort of weird mechanic where if you get a bad item, you can sell it right there on the spot. Like you have like 10 seconds after you pick it up to click on it, press sell, and then it's going to be sold instantly. But then everybody's going to do that if they find a ring. And yes, they're going to get gold, but then people that look at the game, they're going to be like, why is he getting an item that's so garbage that he's selling it? It seems a little stupid, but at the same time, that it's part of like the RNG. Like you could just explain to them that, well, it might be helpful to someone else, but to him now it wasn't helpful, so he sold it. So I could see something like that being the way to solve like that item RNG and making the game more fair. And then I just think it would be very beneficial. But for that to happen, somebody has to make the decision. The big boys, like the people that organize tournaments, DreamHack, whatever, WGL, they need to be the ones on board with something like that and have it happen. And it feels like for them to even be interested in that, it has to be implemented maybe before into something like WT Champions. And for that to happen, somehow WT Champions needs to decide that they want to do this crazy thing because they think it's wise. And it just doesn't seem likely that it would happen. And somebody would have to make it happen. But I don't know how you guys see this ever happening. Even like the maps that we talked about tonight, for them to be properly implemented, like some of them are being implemented, but the whole process of it, of like being like, yeah, we're gonna be the one like to do this and stuff. It's very complicated and it seems difficult to actually go through with it. So I don't know, Carson and Remo in particular, I'm curious, how do you guys see this happening? Like the goal today, right, was to have this discussion and to think about maybe ways that the map pool could be made better. Now we've started going into items. What do you guys think would be the best course of action?
It's of course like there's a lot of things that would be good for the game, but then there's a lot of politics behind it. You got the tournament organizers, you have Blizzard, you have the map makers, you have the players, and everybody has different opinions on these things. So it's really to get all 4 to come together. There may even be more sets of people as well, but to get them all to come together and agree on something is really difficult to do. So we're sort of stuck in the ways that Blizzard decided they should be, and they fixed a couple of the items and stuff, but there's still always going to be issues. And again, you're always back to that problem of spectator player. It's less exciting for the spectator, it's more balanced for the player, and you're ruining the essence of the game, and Blizzard doesn't want that. And then the map makers don't want to spend time on something that's not going to be implemented, so it's really difficult for everything to come together. But again, I think at least just trying things out, I think a really good start would be War 3 Champions to have a PTR that we can try stuff out on. And, as long as we're not overworking the people doing the actual work behind these things, like the map makers, the people that are making these changes and sort of, forcing them in, then we can at least try it out and see how it is. And if we try something out and it's truly good and the whole community is behind it, we can hope that it might translate to TOs and to Blizzard and stuff like that, although it may be a pipe dream. But I think that's a good start, is to have some sort of a PTR that we can try these things out on. Just take TS and lower the tier of all the items down and try it out. Like, it's not boring. PTRs have had issues where there's just very little changes. So people are like, I don't want to try it. There's, Orc has 1 more supply. Why would I go play on PTR when I can play? But if there's big sweeping changes, it would actually have more appeal, I feel like, in this sort of, if we force in a PTR style thing on War 3 Champions, maybe might be a way to do it and get it some traction.
Well, the problem with PTRs, Carson, is that nobody fucking plays on them.
Exactly. Yeah, that is the big problem for sure.
Remo?
Yeah, but especially for Warcraft, it was because the freaking PTR was on US server, and playing it from Europe, it was US West. So you had like 250 ping. It was absolutely atrocious, was cancerous. So I also think having a PTR option for War 3 Champions would be cool. In fact, they did PTR already for their specific custom lobby hosting Flowbots thing. So going further with that and moving into map design would be very interesting. But once you do that, the door is going to be open and people are going to say, hey, let's do these and these balance changes. And then there's going to be this huge mob of people trying to make balance changes suddenly, when it's very disconnected from the actual company with authority. At the end of the day, the authority lies with Blizzard to make the balance changes in the end, and there's no reason to assume that they would listen to what the community on War 3 Champions came to the conclusion of. Plus, if you do balanced PTR changes, how the hell are you going to have a referendum? Are you going to do like Discord votes on how much bonus HP or how much revive HP Ankh is supposed to give? Then it's going to be very, very weird. But PTR for balance, for map reasons, I can see, but I don't think it has to be necessarily that complicated with the PTR. I don't know if I'm not touching on the balance issue enough, but I feel like tonight is more about maps, which is why I'm going to come back to maps now. Although, Todd, I want to reinforce what you said earlier. The item value thing, I spoke to this point as well. You came up with it additionally, that items that you sell should have higher value. I think that's brilliant. I think that should be the case, because it should reward you more if you sell a bad item. However, I think you said something before, like 80% sell value. I think that would be a little too extreme, because I think it should still, mostly items shouldn't be sold because they're cool aspect, but it should be a little bit more gold in case you have to sell them.
I just said probably a random number because I don't even know what they sell for, to be honest. So,
but okay, back to the point of maps and current maps. There's a lot of stuff to do still with maps and a lot of new things perhaps to include as well. But our goal here was to review the maps we currently have in the pool and the ones that could be added to tournament pool and to War 3 Champions pool. So I think towards the end of the show here, we should go around here and say which maps we think should be removed and which should be added. Who wants to go first?
I'm finding the maps.
How about you, Remo?
I've been going first all night.
All right, Carson.
All right.
Like for tournament pool and for War 3 Champions pool.
Tournament pool and War 3 Champions.
So
okay.
Separate.
Yes. Because we have to be, of course, very careful with the tournament pool, like we do with balance changes and stuff like that, because we don't want to ruin the integrity of tournaments. And we especially don't want to force players to play on something they're not comfortable with when they're not ready to do so. So ladder should always be first. But, I mean, if it starts on ladder, it should be followed with tournaments, just later, not immediately. But obviously, of the 7 map pool, I don't even think TR should be in the question. I think it should be TM in that 7 map tournament map pool. I think EI should be gone. I think AZ is still debatable. I think there's lots of mixed feelings on AZ. But EI should definitely be gone. What should it be replaced with? In a tournament setting, I think Autumn Leaves is the most likely candidate right now. So EI out, and then we'll have Autumn Leaves and Twisted Meadows in there with the other standard maps. Maps that I would like to see in the future, I really like the Tortoise Haven map. I think that's probably, of the new ones, that's probably my favorite, but I, of course, haven't got a chance to play it. And if we want to remove Twisted Meadows in the future, obviously, I think it was Shattered Exile was the other macro map, which would be cool to have in there. You know, other than that, the other 3, the Shallow Grave and Ruins of Azshara, I think those could sort of be switched around with where Autumn Leaves occupies, the replacement for Echo Isles. Those 3 could maybe be rotated through, but I think, you know, we have a clear replacement for Twisted Meadows if we want to get that out. And then most likely what I want to see is Tortoise Haven. I just like it. I think I'm biased, but I just like it.
Matthew?
Well, obviously my maps are by far the best, and we should have a map pool of 7 maps of my own. But more seriously, I think if I get to pick, I would replace Amazonia with Autumn Leaves right now. And then I think Tortoise Haven and Ruins of Azshara one of them should replace Echo Isles maybe after 1 or 2 seasons of War 3 Champions, after they've been potentially updated, and after we've seen if there are any balance issues with them which we might not know about yet, and if one of them is clearly more popular than the other. And then gradually next, well, I'm not sure, maybe even we should replace Terenas Stand with Shadow Grave or something. I don't know. I'm not sure, but at least AC and Autumn Leaves first, and then Echo Isles next.
Yeah, personally, Echo Isle is probably my number one that I want to see removed. Autumn Leaves would be a great replacement. I don't even count Turtle Rock as part of the map pool because the only tournament I play is Meisterschaft, and in Meisterschaft it's not part of that map pool anyway, so Turtle Rock for me does not even exist, in fact. The next two that I would like to see gone would be probably Amazonia and Twisted Meadows, and if I had to pick some maps to replace them, it's kind of hard. Personally, I'm not really sold on Brightwater Oasis and Ruins of Azshara. I think I'm a hater of that tile set. So I think that might be why. I would say maybe two maps between Shallow Grave, Shattered Exile, and Tortoise Haven. Two of those maps to replace Amazonia and Twisted. And yeah, for Echo, please make this map go, and Autumn Leaves is a clear good replacement in my opinion. I might end up regretting it if I find out that Autumn Leaves is harder to play on, but so far I've thought it was a fairly neutral map, and I think it will make the rotation really a lot more fun if even in whether it's in tournament or ladder, we see a lot more of a rotation for those maps. That's it. Remo.
All right, so first tournament map pool. Turtle Rock has no place to be anywhere, so F Turtle Rock, get out of here. Also, Echo Isles, never want to see that map again. Echo Isles has to go as well, and Amazonia. So that would kind of leave us with five remaining maps in the tournament pool. Concealed, Last Refuge, Northern Isles, Twisted, and Terenas. And the two that I would like to see added to this right away is AL. Autumn Leaves has already gotten its test and has turned out to be good. And Tortoise Haven. Might be a bit of an extreme move to include Tortoise Haven, say, for example, to the next EPT season, which would be in April, I believe, something like that. But I think there would be enough time. So, yeah, remove Turtle Rock in brackets wherever it's placed, but also remove EI and Amazonia, especially Echo Isles, and include for it Tortoise Haven and Autumn Leaves. I think that's pretty clear. I would even love to go even further than that and go with a 3-map rotation, but I know that would be too extreme for most people. In terms of ladder, we currently have 10 maps in the pool, I believe. I think we can kick Turtle Rock out of there. I think nobody wants to play that map, especially for the West. Nobody's playing that in tournament anyways. We don't need Turtle Rock in the pool. So I would love, we would have, in my scenario, then also have to have a Tortoise Haven in the ladder pool to support the tournament pool. And I'm going with my personal favorite, Brightwater Oasis. I know not everyone likes it, but I love that map still to this day. And Shallow Grave. I think Shallow Grave would also be cool to include first into the ladder map pool, not right away into the tournament map pool. Because it's just well made, it's unique, it's very interesting looking, and it does fill the role of the small map. I think we need to have some smallish maps. If we get rid of AZ and EI, which I think we should look towards some smaller replacements, which Shallow Grave follows in. That is what I would like to see right away, those examples I just said. And through time, I would love to see other maps like Shattered Exile and newer ones also coming in and replacing TS and TM, those other problematic ones.
Would you ever see yourself talking to WT champions and make them making recommendations for them for next season? Because it feels like it's the first step. If WT champions starts adding some map, in this case they already did that with Autumn Lives, then at least we get to see games on it. Then the map can be considered for EPT or whatever. So do you think that would be a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. And they have been in conversation, not with me, but with, or not directly, but with the Hive Workshop crew. They have very heavily asked for their input. And I think they're making their decision within the next few weeks. The War 3 Champions guys, heavily relying on the Hive crew feedback. And I think they have made a similar case to what we have made here. But I think what we learned over the last 3 months is that only adding it to War 3 Champions ladder doesn't necessarily have to be enough. I feel like it is not enough to really push forward new maps. Because what we saw with Ruins, especially, and also with Autumn Leaves, is that almost everyone has it vetoed all the time if you're a really good player, unless it's part of the tournament pool. So I think we have to put it into War 3 Champions first, but then start throwing it into the tournament pool right after, like 2 weeks after or something, if your tournament schedule allows for it. I think we can't wait for 9 months until finally some people start playing the map on ladder. I think we have to do it right away with the tournaments as well.
Because I'll veto a map if it's not in tournaments. Like I always did that. And like when Northern Isles and Concealed Hill were introduced to the map pool in tournaments, although I didn't like them at first, I didn't like Concealed Hill particularly at first. As soon as it was in the tournament rotation, I immediately unvetoed it and started playing it. So I think these go hand in hand for at least players that view the game through a more competitive sort of view, which I'm sure a lot of people on War 3 Champions that are on that client itself are viewing it through a tournament lens. So I think, yeah, these go hand in hand. Absolutely.
What is your dream scenario then for things to unfold? Like you made suggestions about the maps. Like how do you see things happening for you to be like really happy? Like Remo, go first. Like,
all right, so next season they remove Turtle Rock out of the pool and they add at least 2 maps. I would prefer to see 3.
yeah,
If we
who's
have
they?
3 maps, they is War 3 Champions guys. So I'm just talking about ladder right now. So we have then, this would be a little extreme. We would have 12 pools, 12 maps on ladder. But I think it's okay because like more than half of them we have played for 15 years. And then the next tournament starting right after, like B2W Weekly Cup, once it returns, and the next DreamHack season, and I don't know, whatever other tournament is starting, should all start picking up these maps right away. Some of these maps. Remove AZ and Echo Isles and add 2 of the new ones right after. Right after it has been added to ladder.
And then in the future, you will see these maps as staying there for a long time, or they don't have to, and then they could be replaced with like a steady rotation if there's good new ones.
Yeah, hopefully they're good and they turn out to be as amazing as Concealed and Northern. Honestly, I'm a little concerned for these new maps because it's really hard to keep up with the standard of Concealed and especially Northern Isles, which turned out to be so brilliant. But we should give those maps a chance, and honestly, it can only be better than Echo Isles. But it can also possibly be the case that we add a new map, and after 3 months of tournament play, we see, this map is pretty boring, it's really predictable, and it's also kind of unfair in some regards, and maybe then we have to pull it again.
Yeah.
But I think that's okay. It's not like our current map pool is so pristine and untouchable that all these maps are beautiful, brilliant works of art of a demigod. You know, it's like most of the maps are like okay, so we can afford to take some risks, and I think we should take a little bit of risk.
I saw Caspian in the chat writes that, like, you know, don't delete the history of Warcraft 3 and stuff because, like, it's been the same maps, like, forever. He was saying that he prefers Seacrest Valley and Ancient Isle to Autumn Leaves, for example, probably because of the tiles, or I don't know. What do you think? Like, is there a chance that a lot of people think like that and maybe it ends up being a fail because of that? Or, like, Carson?
I hope people don't think like, oh God, bring back Secret Valley. I mean, me and Remo have had this conversation late at night. You know, after a couple drinks, we've argued about Secret Valley, and you know, I have some nostalgia. Same with Ancient Isles, I have some nostalgia. You know, the WCG 2012, we saw so many nice Elf against Undeads on that map, and like, ooh, it's nice. And you know, Remind against Grubby on Secret Valley, and there's nostalgia, and we love these old maps, but this is probably unique. I'm not sure how it is in StarCraft. I know Brood War has kept a lot of the same old maps, but they've continuously introduced new stuff.
In StarCraft, they introduce at least 3 maps per season, and they keep 4 of the previous pool. So if you go like 2 seasons later, you'll have no map from the first season, basically from season 1 to season 3. You'll have no map remaining, and like it doesn't really like. I mean, it's a good system in my opinion. They have like very active map makers.
For my personal taste, that would be too extreme to have a completely rotated out map pool every 1.5 years, but maybe that's just my Warcraft bias, being so used to these maps. But I'm sorry, Casman, but I cannot tolerate that opinion. This is like people saying 1.28 was the greatest patch ever, and why did we ever move away
Don't summon
from
anyone.
Talon's tower push and tanks? I respect your nostalgia, but it's bullshit. No, just because you're used to it doesn't mean it's good. A lot of the maps that we have in the pool are bad. Echo is objectively bad. Amazonia, in many regards, is objectively bad. We can do much better. Don't be too afraid of change, bro.
That's a good point, too.
We have to change things to keep this stuff fresh, a little bit fresher at least. We already struggle with patches being pretty damn rare. And if it means risking that perhaps some of the new maps aren't the greatest, then so be it. But so far, the two most recent additions are the best maps we have ever had. So there's no reason at the moment for us to doubt map development. And also, like, what are you trying to do? Stagnate forever in the same patch with the same maps? Hell no. Get the fuck out.
Actually, I saw, I don't know how accurate it is, but I saw a quote by, maybe it was Infi recently, that was translated where he said that, like, he was pretty unhappy with the amount of patches and all the changes that there were, and he said that Blizzard made all their decades of practice or whatever useless by changing the game so much, because they had ironed their skills so much on like one of the previous patch that had been there for a very long time. So it's definitely a certain line of thinking about this, and I can see how some people would be able to think that. Yeah, Carson, what's your dream scenario then?
Yeah, and I'll touch on that first, and but if the game isn't interesting and the viewers aren't there, then people like Infi don't have a career. So people won't watch their streams, people won't fund their tournaments. You need people to enjoy watching the game, and you need other people other than pros to enjoy playing the game, or else there is no game.
But they might make an argument that there doesn't need to be changes for people to watch the game.
Right. Yeah, that could be fair. And you could also make the argument that maybe as the meta develops, the maps have to develop. So what was good with Talon and Sky Push and tank meta would work on the maps of past times, but may not work on the current maps, and vice versa. For the current meta may be better for the current maps, and we need to have a different view of the game to find out what is best for the maps. But for me, what would be ideal, really, if we can shave off everything, like I think the 3 maps that are really good in the current pool are Last Refuge, Concealed Hill, and Northern Isles. Other than that, I'm willing to see the rest go. I think Terenas Stand, you could make an argument too, although there's some balance issues in some matchups. But I think those maybe 4 maps. Other than that, you could really, let's try some maps out. So I think maybe not removing all of them. I think Echo Isles probably definitely should go. We should just start with removing the clear weakest one. I mean, there should be a debate between Echo Isles and Amazonia, but one of those 2 should definitely go to start. Just get it out of the pool, and then start adding in some of these new maps. And then eventually, if the debate happens to fall on the side of Echo Isles, then maybe there should be a talk in the future about whether or not to remove Amazonia, and just slowly start siphoning out one map at a time, not a bunch at a time, and just start introducing these new maps. But I think we should just pull the plug on at least one of these just to start, but not do anything too fast, in my opinion.
Wasn't it exciting though in 2018 when we had the map change, and it wasn't just 1, but it was 2? It was Northern and Concealed at the same time.
Yeah, but what maps got removed? None back then.
AI and Turtle Rock.
AI and TR.
Oh, and also, they remastered a bunch of maps for the positive.
Yeah,
for sure. Like Terenas is better.
Yeah.
I think actually only introducing 1 new one is not enough. I think then you give too much room for all players to silently agree to just ignore that map. I think it really should be 2 at the same time.
That is true. Yeah, you see that a lot in the vetoes when you're not like in a best of 5 forced into playing it. In a best of 3, you just won't ever see it. So yeah, I can agree with that.
Mafe?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways to see this. One, ideally we would have a more positive attitude in the entire community towards new maps. That's what I personally would dream of. But more realistically, the tournament organizers need at some point to just make the decision, we are going to introduce a new map. And yes, I have a relatively negative view of the community with respect to being open for new stuff like new maps. So there will always be a very large or very loud voice within the community that will rather see old maps come back like Lost Temple for whatever reason, instead of seeing a seeing new map. And so there will be some backlash if there are new maps, but the people who make the decisions will just have to accept this and trust that they will ultimately move Warcraft 3 forward, because that's what I genuinely believe, that we cannot just live on nostalgia. Even though the game is almost 20 years old, we have to keep introducing new stuff to keep the game fresh, and that's the thing that will keep Warcraft 3 alive. Maybe it will hurt in the short run, but in the long run it will be better for us all. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I got a question for you guys. What do you think about polls? And I know we have a bad history with polls in Warcraft, between the W3 champion poll on like what to add next, where there was like alleged cheating around the FFA, like we're not sure what happened, but there was some people talking about that. And then more recently, they changed the maps to winter maps, and they made a poll on how long to keep it. And the most voted one was keep it until the new year, or whatever I think it was. But then people were so outraged that there was so much whining on the Discord that they just reverted the change. So yeah, I feel like polls in Warcraft 3 are like a dicey thing to talk about. But what do you guys think about potential polls to try and to figure out what people think about the maps, which need to be replaced and stuff? Is that a good idea?
I think polls are very overrated. If you're trying to get a very influential and meaningful poll going, a poll is basically an election between different options, and that only makes sense if people are familiar with the different options. And the simple fact of the matter is, almost nobody actually invests time to study those maps, to learn those maps, to discover those maps, to host those maps in their client and go through them and creep them and learn them. We have people who do that, and that is the map making community mostly, and some very, very few dedicated players who invest the time. Those players, though, that do invest the time to do this, like for example, Neutron sometimes did, and I believe Lawlight, they will give feedback to the mappers. So if you go for an open poll, I think the only thing you do is allowing in a ton of ignorance and maybe some weird country politics, like we heard before about the German community taking over at some point. I think an open poll on a topic like this one, where a lot of detailed knowledge is required, is absolutely overrated and not necessary.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues with polls. The first being, in this community in particular, streamers have a big influence on people. If Grubby says something, that is going to win the poll 100% of the time. Maybe if Remo or Neo or Todd or you guys say something, maybe
Definitely
that'll have
not
influence.
me.
But for the most part, if Grubby says that this should be voted on the poll, that is going to be what wins 100% of the time. So really, should we just ask the big?
I don't think he
influencers in
would
the scene?
say what should be voted. He'd say what he thinks, and then people can
Yes.
like form their own opinion. But you mentioned
Yes.
like, for example, for the new maps, we can't ask people to vote for what new maps they would like to see because they don't even know them. Like we don't even know them, and we've looked at them much more than anyone else. But what about, for example, making a poll that says which maps do you think should go from the current map pool? Don't you think that could be interesting?
That would be probably the most accurate.
Yeah.
And then what maps should we bring in of the new maps? So that we're sort of, okay, we're going to remove 2 maps and we're going to add 2 maps. So that would sort of be like, it would be less like the FFA thing, which, was one of the most scummy things in the history of this community, but it'd be less like that. And it'd be more people would be forced to make a decision, and it would be for a positive change.
Yeah, but what if it gets rigged? What if there's some troll movement? What if there's any kind of weird interference, and somehow they veto for concealed in Northern Isles?
Right?
Like
yeah.
why do we have to take this risk for
Yeah, but
bullshit to happen?
It can be found out about. I think it's also nice, to let democracy win a little bit, Like, no, I don't know. I do think that a poll could be something also good, even though, like I said in the past, in Warcraft, we've had bad history with. I'd be interested, just for science, to know what the community thinks. Is like, what is their most hated map, Like, what if it's Terenas? I'm like, no. Like, but, yeah. No, just a point I wanted to bring up with you guys. But yeah, it's interesting. I guess ultimately it's in the hands of I guess W3 champions, they'd be the one adding a new map, but any one of us could make a poll. Maybe I will tonight
Go for it, bro.
after
You
this,
should,
and then
yeah.
we'll see what happens. It's nothing official. I just want to know. Okay, so if you guys have some questions in the chats, we can take maybe a few questions and then do shoutouts. It's already been 3 hours pretty much, so I don't want to keep you guys too long. Robond asked something. He asked, can you ask which new map is the best for 2 versus 2? We didn't really do 2 versus 2 maps today, right? It was all solo.
No.
We did mention one map was made as a 2v2 map, right? Was that Shattered Exile?
I originally intended it to be a 2v2 map, but then I sort of made some changes to make it more suitable for 1v1, and I'm, well, not entirely convinced, but also not convinced that it will work, but also not convinced that it won't work. I'm just not sure. So just touching on 2v2 maps, there have been, maybe he's referring to the recent editions of the 2v2 map for the 2 Warfare Champions. I'm not really a 2v2 player, but these maps also were sort of selected in collaboration between Warfare Champions and of us mappers, so that's basically what we agreed on would be the most suitable maps for 2v2, those which are on Warfare Champions already.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't really cover 2v2 too much, or at all today, really. Helpstone asked, what do you guys think about making the new W3 Champions 1v1 map unvetoable for a short time? For the first weekend, for example.
Oh, Jesus.
Or give it a higher priority in the map selection process for later games. So that's what NetEase does. And when I played on NetEase, there was this big map, like this big brown map, I don't know the name, where there was like murlocs in the center and stuff for like a mercamp. It was absolute trash, and it tilted me so hard to get this map all the time. So personally, I'm like strongly against this. I feel like you should definitely still give an opportunity. And right now I'm on live tilt about those host bots. Like I just, the laggy servers, like earlier today, I just keep saying it, please allow us to select what servers we play on, because I'm having to put BNet only right now, because otherwise I get like some really laggy games. So I don't want to imagine if it was like always global, I'd lose my mind. And it's the same with maps.
Yeah. Warfare Champions have been talking about this for a long time, disallowing vetoing of the new maps. I think that's a very bad idea. I think that is one of the quickest ways you antagonize the player base towards new maps. If you force them to play on them when they don't want to, that's the quickest way you make them hate all those maps, and maybe hate them, maybe make them hate your platform as well. Now, you made the point about NetEase, you can't veto the maps there, but that's just the way NetEase has always worked. It's never been different. People are nowadays used to being able to veto. I don't think you can take that away from them. And it also makes things very weird. What about if that one map turns out to be really bad for orc versus human? And then you can't give them a chance, and they always have to play a losing matchup there every time they're there. Just include them into the tournament pool, and once it's the tournament pool, then people will play it on ladder. Once it's on both, it will be played.
Agreed. Yeah, you can't tell people how to play, especially if there's more casual people. We don't want just the hardcore people on War 3 Champions. We want everyone on War 3 Champions, ideally. And you can't, I think that's a game design sort of side of things too. You can't tell people how to play the game, or they're going to say fuck you and they're not going to play your game. So like, we can't force people to play maps they don't want to play. We can slightly nudge them towards trying out these new maps and then remove the maps that are clearly bad for the community and for the balance of the game. But I don't think we could force people to play on maps.
Spirit Bombs asked, I have a question. Why map makers don't try any other merc shop than the red one with Trolls, Ogre, and Muddy? What about Teleports and Dragon Roost? Mafe, take this one.
Well, the merc camps, they were just flat out imbalanced. Until recently, Blizzard patched them, but I've actually invested a lot of time in writing an analysis. It's probably still available at the Hype Workshop, and it explained why every single merc camp except for Lottery Summer is basically bullshit. So recently they changed them. Now they are usable again, potentially, but it's sort of, so in my map Shattered Exile, I have a new merc camp, but the new mercs are sort of boring because they are just mostly Lottery Summer mercs with a different skin. So nowadays there's not much difference anymore. Dragon Roosts are basically merc camps with special mercs. They are not balanced at all because of the big dragons, which is just ridiculous. And Waygates, yeah, maybe you can use them, but with all of this stuff, it's sort of like if you use this as a map maker on your map, you risk antagonizing the players because they're not used to it and they might dislike your map because of it. So if you do it, you really have to really know what you are doing and why you are doing. Otherwise, you just made a map which no one will care about, just like Carson just said. We're not going to play this map if we don't like it.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think that's it. Let's do a few final closing words from everybody and shout outs and all that jazz. Mafe, you were the last guy speaking, so go right ahead. Do you have any shout outs? Take your time. Remember everybody, if you forget that one map maker who helped you place a palm tree or like a critter this one time, they're gonna be angry at you. So
yeah, that's impossible to remember all of them. So I want to give a special shout out to my secret hero of Warcraft 3, which is the person who ultimately made the decision to include Conceit Hill and Northern Isles. I don't know who it is. I might never find out. I suppose it's some Chinese person over in NetEase. That's what I heard. Maybe we will never know, but you're my hero. So other than that, I want to give out a shout out to all members of the mapping community. I think we are really a nice bunch of people who like to make new maps and help each other. So maybe I just don't want to name anyone. That Tenchi has been here, obviously. He's a great mapper. Then the others who were mentioned of the maps today are Karl, Yalevediki, and Miral, but there are many others. So if you want to join us, maybe one of them is in chat and can write the Discord link to our Discord. So we are always very welcoming to new players because we rely on feedback from players who actually are playing our maps. This would really help our process as we are developing new maps. And yeah, thank you, Todd, and all of you who've been here today for once again giving us this opportunity to present new maps. And one last shout out to Warcraft Champions who are, yeah, it's really motivating to see and encouraging to see you giving new maps a chance. And hopefully others will follow suit soon.
Carson, go ahead.
All right, cool. Well, I want to say this is a very important conversation, and this is about the maps and the community. And I won't give any shout outs for me personally, although you can't follow me on Twitter.
What about
Carson
Hitman?
Ends with a C.
Apparently it was so important they didn't show up.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, we were missing a couple people, but that's all right. But what I want to say to the community, to the people watching, is this may not be always the most interesting topic to listen to. There's no drama, there's no spice, but it's very important for the longevity of the game that we all like, and it's very important for the community and War 3 Champions. And just be open-minded, okay? Be open-minded. Try the new maps. Don't veto them. Don't be angry if you're a pro player and they're in tournaments, although I can understand why you may be angry. But just try them out, man. Just try them out. Give it a chance. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Just one thing, we actually had a lot of drama in some of the not-so-recent mini mapping contests.
Really? Go ahead. No, I'm just kidding. Remo.
Yeah, you can follow me on twitter.com/ or at, I guess, is how the cool kids say it, @RemoDemo. Yeah, I want to echo what Carson's saying. This is not the spiciest of all topics, but this has a big impact on the game, guys. Like, I don't know, I said this like 5 times already. Remember when we played Turtle Rock and AI in the tournament map pool? That actively made the tournament scene worse. Having those 2 maps actually made the scene worse. Having better maps makes the game better, makes the tournaments better, makes the whole scene better. So there's a lot of room for improvement if we only have cool, unique, interesting maps. That actually helps all of us. And this is part of the process. And I hope to see a lot more innovation with that in the future. Shout out to War 3 Champions who are kind of spearheading that whole thing. I doubt that anybody from NetEase is listening, but I would love to see more innovation there once again. But maybe War 3 Champions can really take the helm in that way. And all of you out there can do that as well. on Reddit, on Discord, lobby for the idea of introducing new maps. We don't want to be that stale anymore. We don't want to go back to Plunder Isle. We don't want to see tower pushes and talons every game. We want our game to evolve and move forward and become better and better, the best it's ever been. And having new maps is a big part of that. So yeah, I hope that's going to be happening soon. I hope War 3 Champions will do that. I hope DreamHack will do that. And I'm looking forward to what the future holds with that.
All right, thanks guys for joining me for this map discussion. Hope it's gonna help give some inspiration to W3 Champions, maybe to EPT as well. Who knows? Just getting the discussion going, in my opinion, is pretty important. So yeah, shout out to all you guys. Shout outs to Tenchi, who was with us earlier. Shout out to Robon for gifting a couple subs here just now. Thank you, mates. Jale Veliki as well was in the chat the whole time. I maintain that Back to Warcraft and W3 Champions are the two goats of the scene, but you guys also definitely, all of you here are playing a part. So thank you to all of you and to all the viewers. That's it for us now. Have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you next time with the Town Hall meeting.